we are live. This is it, fellas. Last live stream of 2022. Uh, you know, wow, what a year it has been, to say the least. Whew, there's a lot of things I could say about this year. Uh, but the nice thing about the Hall of Fame is it's not just about this year, it's also about yesteryear. The Shacknews Hall of Fame is a chance for us to reflect upon, like, not just games that came out 25 years ago, but games that came out before that, the history of gaming, how we got to where gaming and technology is today, and what paved the way, what influenced modern gaming and science and technology. And that's what we're going to celebrate today here on the Shacknews Hall of Fame. I'm Blake Morse, co-editor and chief at Shacknews.com. And today I'm joined by an illustrious panel of both old and one young person. TJ Denzer, my illustrious co-host of the Shack News Dump, host of Indielicious, senior news editor at Shacknews.com. Thanks for joining us.
I like to think that I have an old soul, and
you're very deep, TJ.
That's applicable. I can see that.
But yeah, I'm excited. Y'all have been hyping this up for quite a while. It kicked off last year, and we're jumping into the second year, the sophomore year of the Shacknews Hall of Fame.
That's right.
It truly
and
is.
There's no sophomore slump. Would you agree, Blake?
Oh no, absolutely not. This isn't the kind of thing where you get that, David, because there were a lot of things, like a few things that we didn't induct last year that we were like, well, we'll hold off on this. We'll table it. A few of them made the list this year. We also had things that we forgot, I felt like the first year of inductees was pretty thorough, but of course we're going to miss things here and there,
Well, here's the thing.
Our brains don't work.
Here's the thing. The council who chooses these inductees, who nominates them, is called the Council of the Old. It's in the name. We're old. We're going to forget things, like Blake said. So, we also don't want to just open the floodgates and let everyone and everything in. We're pretty selective.
Yeah, the deliberations are actually quite interesting. But really quickly, we'll finish the introductions. David L. Craddock, Long Reads editor, and definitely Council of the Old member. You have just published a book, have you not? You published a few books this year overall, too.
A few?
Yeah, I'm slowing down in my old age. Long Live Mortal Kombat Round 1, the first volume of a trilogy. And TJ, you'll appreciate that the next two books are called Round 2 and Final Round, because it must be a best 2 out of 3. So, nice. Yeah, so I like that. But Long Live Mortal Kombat out now. Blake, your copy is en route. You should be able to read it very soon.
Nice. Once I learn how to read, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it.
I'm
hoping there's a lot of pictures in there. That's my hope.
I put in a Hooked on Phonics and like a C-Spot run book in there. So once you get those two down, you can jump right into this 200,000 word plus epic that I've written.
All right.
You'll be ready.
All right. Sounds good. No, I'm looking forward to checking it out. I'm a big Mortal Kombat fan. I mean, obviously, I'm not such a big fan. I wrote 3 books about it, but I'm still looking forward to reading your pretty words, David. And then, of course, last but not least, head of video production and like a man who loves to go outside and yell at clouds in his old age, Greg Berkelton Burke.
Hello.
Hello, Greg.
I'm alive and I'm here.
Uh-huh.
Yes, Greg, I see you've assembled your entire video team behind you. So wave, everybody.
Wait, this is all the help I get. Yeah, I give prep talks in the mirror.
Hey, some of us record things and send them to you.
This is true.
Yeah,
this is true.
We make more work for you, Greg. Come on.
There's always more work. Always.
Hashtag always more work. But no, Greg, you do work very, very. How many videos do you think you made this year?
I don't know. A couple. I easily, like, if you count gameplay, if you don't count the VODs, it's easily a few hundred.
Um,
Damn.
Greg, when you make your way out to Canton, Ohio, and join us at the Shacknews Intergalactic headquarters, we do have your office. It's labeled Greg's office.
I do
It's
have
just
an office.
it's just the furnace, but we figure that you'll feel right at home in those video mines. You know.
Yeah.
I will feel like in my closed little,
Uh,
like, what's it, like, Ryan from The Office. That's my
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
space.
Basically,
Yeah.
that's accurate. So yeah, it's basically the last day of school here for us, and we're going out in style. We are discussing. We can't, like, I don't think we're going to discuss every Hall of Fame inductee thoroughly, just because we would be here for 8 hours, and we just did that 3 days in a row. So
Yeah.
we're gonna brush over something, but some things here and there. You're welcome to read the article. We can. You know what? I'm gonna post a link if anybody wants to skip ahead. So they see the red wedding coming. You can, but yeah, I think let's just get down to it, and people brace yourself. This next one is a bit of a tearjerker. We're gonna rip the band-aid off right away. Um, Here we go, David. Do you wanna take it, man? Do you wanna do it?
Yeah, I'll take it. This inductee is very special to all of us. Lola, the CEO of Shacknews, passed away this year. It was very sudden. It was very unexpected. It hit us all pretty hard, and we felt that even though she was only 7 in dog years, she was still eligible in human years. And the thing about the Shacknews Hall of Fame is we induct games, developers, teams, extraordinary things, which is a category we'll get into later. Not just that, not just those nominees who have merit in their own right, but who have historical significance to Shacknews. As a case in point, we inducted the original Quake last year. Quake is one of the greatest games of all time, but it's also the bedrock of Shacknews. Our website started as a Quake fan site, so Quake was, if not the very first nominee, our Council of the Old selected last year. It was among the first. And so Lola deserves a special place in the Hall of Fame as well. I can't speak for everyone else, but Asif and I live 8 minutes apart. I got to see Lola quite a bit, and I miss her. But Asif and I have talked a lot about this. We have certain beliefs, and we believe that her energy has kind of been passed along to all of us. Do it for Shacknews is a slogan that Lola really embodied, and she's still with us all in spirit. You can still see her all over the shacknews.com website, as is only appropriate, and she'll always be with us in that way. She was just such a joy, such a ray of sunshine, and it's emotional and it's difficult, but I can't think of really any nominee this year more deserving, and they're all very, very deserving.
The first time I met Lola, she peed herself.
Yeah.
And I've never worked for a CEO that was so excited to meet me that they soiled themselves before. Lola was a sweet little bear, and we loved working for her. She's definitely our cheerleader, our mascot, and on top of our boss. And
Right.
yeah, anyone that we all, everyone. I don't know TJ's experience, but I know that David, Greg, all of the three of us, we know what it's like to love a pet and have to let it go. And losing Lola brings up a lot of that too. You feel that, you sympathize with that, you empathize, and it's tough because we all did love Lola. I don't think any of us could love Lola on the level that Asif loves Lola, but she means a lot to everybody here. and we all love her very much. So
Yeah, humans have a tendency, whether it's subconscious in you or me or anyone or not, whether it's a very active pursuit, to pursue immortality, whether literally or by leaving something behind to be remembered by. Pets aren't nearly that complex, and that's a good thing. They just exist to love you. And Lola, in her way, she didn't seek immortality, but I truly believe that she attained it just because of the impact that she had on all of us and the impact she had on Shacknews. So you can see her in so many of the videos on Shacknews. You can read a little bit about her in the Hall of Fame class of 2022 website that's active on shacknews.com now. And so it sounds trite, but it's true. Lola is gone, but will never be forgotten.
here, here. Okay. Well, we have a lot to get through, and we will all love you and miss you, Lola. But let's begin the process of discussing some of these other folks that are joining this year. All right, we'll start here with Al Alcorn.
Yeah, and I guess just to outline our criteria for those who don't know, it is explained on each. There are now wings of the Shacknews Hall of Fame. This is our second annual Hall of Fame class induction, and so there's a hub page on Shacknews where you can look at the 2021 wing or the 2022 wing. And any of those wings has links to the others. So the general criteria for any wing is that be it a game, a person, a team, a company, an extraordinary thing, whatever we induct or whatever we nominate, first of all, has to be at least 25 years old, whether it's a game that released 25 years ago or a developer who's still active but got their start 25 plus years ago. That's the main criteria. So Al Alcorn is one of the most deserving inductees in this class. For those who don't know, he was one of the earliest hires at Atari, and he's known as the engineer of Pong. But the interesting bit of trivia, and I wrote Al's entry, so you can read it on the site. Al was not told, hey, make the first commercially successful video game that will spawn an entire industry. It was actually just a training exercise. Back then, Al actually was not a programmer. He was an electrical engineer because games were not yet written in code. You actually programmed them by wiring circuits together. And the fewer circuits you used that meant less cost, less overhead for the company. So the goal was always to use the fewest amount of circuits possible. And because Al was new to video games, Atari co-founder Nolan Bushnell said, hey, just kind of as a warm-up, make a table tennis game. Doesn't have to be anything big. Oh, but I would love to have like a realistic crowd cheering noise when someone scores and sound effects. Okay, good luck. And Al was like, okay. And so he did that. And his little test became Pong, became really the foundation of the industry. It was not the first commercial video game. That would be Computer Space, which was Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney's clone of Space War, which they played at MIT on mainframes there. But Pong was the first commercially successful one. There's a famous story, which is not apocryphal. It's very true that, when Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn installed the first Pong prototype unit at a local bar, they got a call hours later from the proprietor who was frantic. He said, this thing's broken. I've got people who want to play. Come down here and fix it. Well, the problem was it was flooded with quarters. The sensor couldn't read any more quarters being put in, and Atari knew they were onto something, and Al Alcorn knew he was onto something. And I also interviewed him a few years ago for another book, Arcade Perfect, which is about arcade to home conversion. So Al is interesting in that he not only made Pong for arcades, but he made the Atari's home Pong console, not the Atari 2600, but just the unit that played Pong. So he's got his fingerprints all over Pong, and very worthy inductee in this year's Hall of Fame class at Shacknews.
Nice. Let's
Yes.
keep, gonna keep things rolling here.
Yeah.
Bill Budge.
Yeah. This is another one I wrote. Maybe after this, Blake, if you want to talk about one of your inductees. But Bill Budge,
I was just gonna scroll down, but I mean,
is
we can
well,
jump
this is
around.
kind of cool too. This is kind of cool too. Bill Budge created a Raster Blaster, which sounds like it would be a shoot 'em up. It was actually a pinball game, and it was so well received that he actually famously doesn't really like playing video games. He just likes programming them, and so he made Pinball Construction Set, which was kind of one of the first, if not the first, Maker game. If you played Mario Maker or Little Big Planet, this kind of traces back to Bill Budge, who basically this game was just a toolbox full of pinball parts, and you can make your own tables, even copy them onto discs and share them with friends. So that was pretty cool.
Dope. Very cool.
It is red.
All right, well, here's one I wrote. So here we go. Bob Hoskins.
Yeah.
Here in the Council Notes, we were having a discussion about the Super Mario Brothers movie, and we started talking about all the different people that played Mario and how they should be recognized as well. It's because Charles Martinet has been playing Mario forever. We'll get to a few of the other folks that were nominated and inducted this year who have also played Mario. But Bob Hoskins, man, like this is like a refined, well-known actor, right? And if you've seen the Super Mario Brothers movie, you know how hard Bob Hoskins tried. You know how much effort he put into it. Like, he is acting his heart off out there. he's really going for it. This is like basically hot off of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? He had just been Eddie Valiant, which was that was a brilliant role. And he's
one of my favorite characters of all time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this guy has been in Terry Gilliam's Brazil. He's been in a ton of other movies, well known, and this is the one major regret that he had. Basically, he hated working on this movie. He said it was a nightmare, but I know a lot of people harp on this, Donovan. It doesn't shock me that you haven't seen this movie, and I don't know how you would feel about it. It's I'm sure cocaine had a lot to do with it, but I love it. I still love it today, sincerely, even though it is very odd. Still, Bob Hoskins was brilliant. I would have loved to see him get a shot at actually doing a better Mario movie with a better script, which never happened. Even though it was it had that Marvel end cut and scene thing going for it, if you'll recall, but yeah, it never came to fruition.
If I'm not mistaken, this was the movie that made Nintendo tighten up on how it licensed its stuff to third parties, wasn't it?
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit infamous for that. Yeah, but I still think Bob Hoskins did a great job as Mario, brilliant actor, deserves some credit for working with what he's got there. And Donovan, maybe we can bring back movie nights next year, and you and Greg can watch it. But for now, here's another Mario actor entry. I believe Ozzy wrote this, right? But I think we can all talk about growing up with Captain Lou Albano as our Mario. And let me just say, he's the Mario with the best hair out of all the Marios.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That 80s perm.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. You gotta love it.
That's true. I never really thought about that before, but it's iconic. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Captain Lou Albano was a famous wrestler in the 80s in the WWE. He had rubber bands in his goatee and wore Hawaiian shirts, right, David?
Yeah, that was a little bit before I became a fan, but I went back and watched the old footage because as a kid, I didn't know he was a former wrestler. And then once I became a wrestling fan, I'm like, wait, so Mario can do body slams? Interesting. Yeah. And I went back and looked at some of his matches. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That show
Captain
won
Blue.
awards too. Won a lot of children's daytime television awards because it was a really good show that taught people lessons and stuff. It was a really a fun, like, lighthearted show.
Yeah, I'll never forget. Like, it goes around a lot as a meme, but I still remember if you do drugs, you'll go to hell before you die.
That was like,
Yeah.
that was like during the late end of his career, and he was not in the right mind, unfortunately, when he did that.
Yeah. But he not only they did live action segments where he played Mario, and then he also did the voice acting for the cartoon as well. And I'm pretty sure that's him singing "Do the Mario" at the end of the show as well. Like, he really put his all into it. Also, friends with Cyndi Lauper. He plays her dad in the "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" video. Um, just throwing that out. I'm throwing out all my Captain Lou Albano fun facts. Yola Tango has a great song called Captain Lou Albano. That's about all I have for Captain Lou Albano, though. But, like, one of my favorite Marios for sure.
Yeah, that's more than enough. I know that I also liked the Super Mario World cartoon. I think it was like Super Mario 3 and then Mario World, but I didn't like it as much because they did away with the live action segments. I don't even know if Lou Albano voiced Mario in those. He might have, but the Super Mario Brothers Super Show was, I would say appropriately, super special because of those live action segments. It was like, kids like cartoons, but when you see a person dressed as Mario as a kid, you're like, that's the real Mario. And that was a special part of it.
I think that's
Not to mention the guest stars they had on that show. Like, for the time, I think they had Cyndi Lauper on one episode. Like, they had all these huge 80s stars come in the show, and it was amazing.
I just mentioned now he was friends with Cyndi Lauper, Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In one of her music videos, yeah, but I don't think we mentioned
that she
did a
came
guest
on the
appearance
show.
on the show.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they had a bunch of people. They had, I think, Tiffany, or like one of those, or was it Debbie Gibson? Like one of those, like, ball, like, 80s pop singers on there. All sorts of people would come by to hang with the Mario Brothers. Just a super fun show. And how can we not put Charles Martinet into the Hall of Fame? Like, homie has been playing the voice of Mario in video games since, was it Mario 64?
64, yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually an analog. So we talked earlier, Blake, about how occasionally we have oversights. The Council of Old has oversights, right? And I feel like a future inductee, pretty much a lock, is Kevin Conroy. And I was just thinking how when I hear Batman's voice in my head, like when I'm reading a comic, I hear Kevin Conroy because I've grown up and enjoyed Conroy's work since the animated series. When I hear Mario's voice in my head, I hear Charles Martinet. I think it's much the same. I don't know if that was the case for you, but I hear, let's go, it's a me. I hear that voice.
I hear the, oh boy, or
oh boy.
Whoa! I hear a lot of those. Just sort of like yelps and things like that. Those are actually. I really like the little like whoop, woo, wahoo sort of things that Mario does.
Wahoo, yippee! Yeah,
that was.
And Chris Pratt has shown us that nobody else should try it.
Yeah, I was going to say we're joined by senior editor Ozzy Mejia, and Ozzy, you don't even need to know. You don't even need brought up to speed. You just know that we're talking about Charles Martinet right now.
Yep, I sure do.
Yeah. I know that he's involved in the new movie, but nobody really knows how. They might have hired him to do all of those
odes or something, or
I keep wanting to say expletives, but not expletives. Explanations.
Exclamations.
That we got there together as a team. Good job. Yeah, I'm curious if it's Chris Pratt doing those or if they hired Martinet because he.
I would bet that
so
they're
iconic.
in a room together a lot, and Chris
Like
Pratt's just like,
coach.
can you teach me how to do it? And Greg would know this. It's like that whole thing with Radioactive Man. Up and at them. Up and at them.
Up and at them. It's better.
It's that scene over and over again every day on set with Charles Martinet and Chris Pratt.
Charles is like, wahoo! And Chris Pratt's like, wahoo!
I don't think Chris Pratt did anything together with other people. I think he did it at home, and they got him for X amount of hours, and that was all they got him for. And that was it.
He's a
Man,
busy man, Greg.
That's what I'm saying. That's why. Like, you get me for 4 hours. Where's the script? Okay, I'm pounding this out. I gotta go make Guardian 6.
man,
I can see it. Yeah, we got a few Marios this year, and I feel like they're all equally deserving.
these are all Super Mario Bros. Right here.
Yes.
All of them. Each and every one of them. Congratulations to all of you for entering our Hall of Fame. Dan Forden. I wish we had like a little like toasty thing I could put in the corner right here, but we don't. Yeah. I think that is basically what Dan Forden is known as, the toasty guy, right, David?
Is he a Twitch emote on the NetherRealm Twitch? And if he's not, why not?
Yeah, seriously. Like, what are you doing? It'd be great if, like, in Mortal Kombat 2. So for those who don't know, Dan Forden is one of the 4 original creators of Mortal Kombat. Started with Boone and Tobias, and then once they had a playable build, they brought in John Vogel as another artist and Dan Forden. And in Mortal Kombat 2, Dan Forden does more than just the sound effects and the music. He appears in a bottom corner when you do an uppercut. So I feel like if he's an emoji or an emote on the Twitch channel for NetherRealm, it should be only when they say certain words. They should have to figure out what words they say that triggers Dan Forden's appearance. Just like we were kids in the arcade, we had to figure out, what is this toasty guy? Why does he appear? What do I do?
Yeah, but you loved it. You loved it when Toasty came up.
Oh,
it
yeah.
was like a little like, yeah, I accomplished something. It's interesting because like it's so like, people post like pictures of faces in our Twitch chat. I'm like, you can like post a Blake and a Greg emoji if you want. It almost like foreshadows and precedes it by like a decade or so in a lot of ways. Also, I'm thinking like they don't do stuff like this in fighting games really anymore. There's nothing just like wacky and like out of left field like this that pops up.
No, not as much. But he is in Mortal Kombat 11 though. If you go to the tournament stage, like you will still see him if you do an uppercut.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I mean, but like beyond Mortal Kombat, like we used to see a lot of weird stuff in video games, wacky stuff,
like weird little Easter eggs like this.
Yeah, and I think Midway was like the king of it in the '90s. Like all the stuff they put in the NBA Jam games, even in Mortal Kombat 3. You had that little code entry thing as well.
Yeah. So we also can talk about, we inducted Ed Boon and John Tobias, aka Noob Saibot. The funny thing is that I would say that not only was Midway the king of those Easter eggs, but Ed Boon was specifically. Ed was the only programmer up until Mortal Kombat 4. When the series went 3D, he needed a little bit of help. But because of that, he would often do things that no one else knew about, not even John Tobias. John Tobias did not know Reptile existed in Mortal Kombat 1 until he read about him in a magazine. He had to go to Ed, was like, is this true? And I was like, oh yeah, that's true. I just took one of your color palettes and made this reptile. And John Tobias was like, okay, listen. So when you want to do that, that's cool, but let me know so I can like write some lore, do my thing. And Ed was like, oh yeah, sure. So in Mortal Kombat 2, they came up with Smoke and Jade together, but Ed didn't tell John about Noob Saibot. That was another thing where John was like, is this true? And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's true. Okay, well, let me know. So it's just one of those things that I feel like Ed Boon, they, both of them would spend times reading magazines, reading probably, what did they read back then? News groups, AOL message boards, whatever. Just they loved listening, so to speak, to fans talk, because they would actually discuss rumors and say, should we do this one? Should we leave this one? Like, that's how Animalities started. That was something that someone made up. And they were like, hey, we should do that. And then Animalities came out in Mortal Kombat 3. So,
man, I want to save this for when this stuff inevitably gets inducted in future years. But I used to think that Noob Saibot was an urban legend. Like, I never thought it was true. I thought that was just something kids on the playground were making up. And then,
Yeah, like that was really the cool thing about Mortal Kombat, which they still I appreciate to this day that like there are still secrets that the internet can't blow out of the water within 24 hours of a game's release. Like there are still today, and mostly in Mortal Kombat 11, people are still finding new brutalities that pay homage to classic fatalities, right? But it was really cool. Like Ozzy, you know, as a kid, when someone told me, "Oh, you can kill people in Mortal Kombat," I was like, what? That doesn't happen in video games. Like everyone thought fatalities were an urban legend until you saw one. And it was like, what? Like, I think Ed Boon, I feel like Mortal Kombat, people talk about its gore. And yeah, it's super gory. It played a big role in the foundation.
For the time.
Yeah, it was gory for the time. It also played a key role in the foundation of the ESRB, but Mortal Kombat also did a lot for secrets. And so specifically did Ed Boon and John Tobias by really leaning into that and having fun with it. You would go back to the arcade just to keep playing, just to see if this thing you'd read about in EGM was true or not. And I feel like that's really cool.
You know, what's so funny is that you could tell kids today that, oh, this Mortal Kombat game like led to the foundation of the ESRB. And then you would show them Mortal Kombat, and they'd be like, "That's what people got their panties in a twist about."
And then you look
so tame.
Yeah. Oh, then you look at the fatalities of Mortal Kombat 10 or 11, and you're like, okay,
yeah. It's a little nerve-wracking, honestly.
Yeah. It is. They are a bit extra.
All right. I'm gonna keep moving on down the line.
It moving.
We got a lot to get to, and of course, if we're gonna induct a bunch of Marios, we got to get some Luigi's in here too. Danny Wells, man, oh my sweet Danny Wells. Look at that! I love the picture that we picked for this too.
Did you pick that?
I did pick that, and the funny thing about Danny Wells is like Lou Albano had, of course, obviously came from the world of professional wrestling. Danny Wells was an actor who like has been acting since the 70s, and like out of all of his projects, he came to love being Luigi the most. And part of that was because he said that he and Lou Albano would basically improvise all of their skits. Like anything that you would see where they play out the celebrities, all improv, all off the cuff. And he ended up having a lot of fun with that, and ended up being like one of his favorite things that he ever did.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that was so unscripted. That's pretty incredible considering like
they just basically had a basic premise and then they just went.
Okay, so okay. That's solid improv then. I guess it makes sense though. Wrestlers have to improv a lot, right? Like that's basically all they do. And yeah, you put a trained actor with a wrestler. I could see that working out if they're both like vibing, and like you can tell they were vibing like watching it too. Like the act. I mean, it's, you know, we're little kids or whatever, but you know, we know when we're being sold BS as kids, and the show wasn't BS. Danny Wells, of course, he's gonna make it in. You can't put Lou Albano in without putting in Danny Wells, and of course
he was in the Jeffersons too, right?
Yeah, he kept working right up until like the end of the 2000s, and but it was his Luigi role that he ended up like really loving.
Yeah. Ed Boon and John Tobias, we were just talking about these guys being in here. And if you want to learn more about them, read David's book. No.
Rocket Jump.
No, kidding.
Rocket Jump.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah.
Ed Boon has the best eyebrows in gaming.
He does. He's legendary. You know what? Extraordinary thing next year.
Ed Boon's eyebrows. Man, can you just shave them and send them to us, and we'll put them in the Hall of Fame? Like,
yeah, we
have
could
them
do
bronze.
That. Glass case. Yeah.
Ed Boon's bronzed eyebrows.
Yeah.
It is weird that Ed Boon is still part of that franchise since its inception. Like, I feel that's super rare now to have somebody still today on the franchise, you know, that hasn't retired or moved on or passed on or something like that.
And he's about to reboot it again, I think.
He's gonna do it again.
Probably.
Really?
Because I think based on the ending of MK11, I think it's about to get rebooted a third time.
He's been rubbing elbows with too many people at DC. He just wakes up every now and then like, reboot. No, we've got a lot of inductees in each category. But like, should we just pick like half a dozen or so to talk about, and then
I don't know. We can just somebody say stop if they've got something to say. How about that? Since we have so much to get.
Sure.
All right. Guichi Suda 51, stop. I fucking love Suda 51. I fucking love him. I love him as a person. I love his games. This man makes shit that's just crazy, out there, wild, creative, and fun. Oh man, he's got his own aesthetic to stuff that I love. His stuff is so reminiscent of like B movies and Grindhouse and anime action adventure. Uh, and yeah, he's been making video games forever. He started off as like a writer and producer or director on the Fire Pro Wrestling games, and like he became well known because like he made, I think it was the second Fire Pro Wrestling, and he had a really dark story in it, and he recently went back to it and wrote kind of a redemption arc for that from that main one. But yeah, it was kind of a sadder series, and then I think most people kind of caught a glimpse of who Suda 51 was when Killer 7 was released in the US. That kind of put him on people's maps as far as games go, but No More Heroes cemented him, I think, as sort of like everybody's like I don't know. He made Lollipop Chainsaw with James Gunn, and I think he's very similar to James Gunn in that sense. James Gunn made a lot of like indie films and trauma films and things like that before he moved on to do Guardians of the Galaxy that everybody knows, and I think that they had a very similar aesthetic and sort of mentality about the stuff that they made, and it worked out really well. He just wrapped up No More Heroes 3, and nobody knows where he's going to go from here because he's kind of wrapped up the story of Travis Touchdown and his cohorts now. But
he was a robot in the Devolver presentation.
He was. I mean, and I honestly feel like if that presentation didn't have Suda, it would have been nothing. That's just my hot take on it. I mean,
you're absolutely right. He made that worth watching.
Yeah, but a lot of his games kind of have that cult following too. Shadows of the Damned, Killer is Dead, No More Heroes. I'm sure I'm missing stuff, but
we don't have a lot of like real auteurs in video games, like outside of maybe like Kojima or something. But like he's definitely one of them. He's like, if you hear that something to Suda 51 joint, like you're gonna be curious about it if nothing else.
Yeah. If I hear Suda's involved, I'm like, oh, here's something I'm definitely gonna have to check out. He's punk rock, man. I love him.
He's very good at subverting traditional game design and trying new things and making, and not all of them work, but like some of them really do. That's why Killer 7 is so freaking good, because
Yeah.
I don't think there had ever been anything quite like that, where like you're the same person, but like 7 different personalities off of the same person that operate and act and have very different gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
That's really trippy and really fun and really cool.
Yeah. Also, like, Japanese developers are usually seen as very stoic. They don't really have a lot of personality per se, but Suda's very outgoing, very jovial, and really fun to talk to. I've had the opportunity to interview him several times now, and he's like one of my favorite people to chat with. So there we go. All right, here we go. Hajime Wakai. He is a sound director and composer. Who wants to take this one? Who did any of you guys? Did Ozzy or David? Did either of you write this one? Or
I didn't write this one, but I'm definitely familiar with the Star Fox 64 soundtrack, and that's one of my favorites of all time. I mean, just the music from start to finish, it's just unforgettable. And the Star Wolf theme in particular is something that's really stuck with me over the years. It's a real, like, shits on kind of theme, and it sticks with you, man.
That is a baller theme for how simple and straightforward that game is. It's has music is absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good one. Iron Man Stewart of Iron Man Stewart's Super Off-Road that many of you probably played in the arcade as well as I did. Really cool arcade game. We were discussing this, and we realized that like the home version was super off road, but the arcade version was Ivan Iron Man Stewart's super off road. David, I think you might be able to elaborate just a little bit upon that before we move on.
Yeah, so part of our holiday content here at Shacknews will be my interview with Ivan Iron Man Stewart. I actually reached out to him, just wanted to talk about how he got involved in games, and he actually told me the story of why his name was taken off the games. It's probably exactly what you think it is, given how capitalism works. But he was still very proud of it, very proud of his association with the games, got to play them. And what I found interesting about him, I wrote a little bit of it in his biography in the Hall of Fame, is that he was an iron worker who got really good at racing, and that became his full-time thing. So he kind of paved his own path to paved his own destiny there. It was pretty cool to talk to.
That's dope. Yeah, I mean, definitely a shout out, and I love that game. I've just played it in the arcade all the time. We've, spoiler alert, we've inducted it as well. And one of the things I loved about it, David, is it was like one of the first pay to win games I can recall ever existing, because you could put in extra quarters so that you could beef up your engine and your steering and your brakes, and also give yourself extra nitrous boosts. So, like, if you had enough quarters or a game on free play, you could just go in and, like, beef everything up.
Yeah, that's true.
Get
And
the W.
I mean, the irony there is like every arcade game was pay to win, right? But as pay to win as we know it today, I see exactly what you're talking about there.
What an iconic cabinet too! That 3-wheel cabinet. The colors on each side, the red, the yellow, the blue, the pedals on the ground. Like, that cabinet stood out in the arcade so much.
For sure. It was baller. But let's keep going. Hey, look at this. Another Luigi. John Leguizamo played Luigi in the first Super Mario Brothers movie. I think we could basically leave it at that. He was there.
I would say that when we had the Shack chat of who would you rather see play Mario than Chris Pratt, I went with John Leguizamo because he's still good at what he does. He's still a really good actor. And even in like Violent Night that came out earlier this month, like he's still so good. And you know what? Like he's one of those guys who like knew what trash this movie was, but the more it became a cult hit, the more he's like, you know what? I was happy to be a part of it. Like he came around to it, and there's something to be appreciated about that.
He says that he appreciated that it was blind casting.
That it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he also came out, he was chastising the new Super Mario Brothers movie because he feels like it's a whitewashed cast. And he thinks that the original Super Mario Brothers film was nothing like that, in his opinion.
That's a good point. Yeah.
No, it's true. Although I can't unsee Keegan-Michael Key as Toad.
Yeah,
like that. He's the first person I think of other than Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
Not to mention, John's got one of the best lines in that whole movie, which was the Mario joke is one of the best lines in any video game movie.
So
hands
stupid,
down.
and it's so
I'm
great.
Sorry, it's so good. It's so good because it makes perfect sense. His name is Mario. Of course it is, because it's the Mario Brothers. Why would it not be Mario? Luigi Mario.
All right, John.
He has a lot of. Oh,
sorry. I'm just moving.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. All right.
That's fine.
No, say it. Say it really quick. Do it.
I was gonna say nothing is impossible, only improbable is also one of the things that I remember most from that movie.
You just gotta believe, TJ. You just gotta believe.
All right, so here we go.
Trust again.
John Madden, one of the greatest football coaches of all times, and undoubtedly maybe the greatest NFL commentator ever. He took the Raiders to the Super Bowl, which I'll always be thankful for. I don't know, man. I don't know if you grew up watching football, like John Madden and his commentating style. The television thing that the writing over the the teleprompter that he would do, all that stuff. We all know, of course, everybody here watching because of the video games probably knows John Madden as well. The annual NFL licensed game that comes out from EA Sports. It's in the game every year, for better or worse. Yeah, they basically started making the Madden games in the early 90s, and they were better than anything else out at the time, basically.
I recommend watching High Score on Netflix and watching the Genesis episode, because it goes into a big chunk of why they picked Madden in particular to be a part of that Genesis lineup.
And like the NFL has had a long history of dealing with player health and player safety and head safety and brain safety. And when I remember, one of the things that stood out most about when John Madden died was that there was a lot of people out there that were like, "Well, he was a football guy and he supported that." And there was so many people that came out. I was like, "That's where you're wrong." John Madden was actually a huge proponent of player safety and health, and actually helped support concussion procedures that are in place right now.
Yeah, I mean that's also part of like the Raider legacy and Al Davis's legacy as well. Like John Madden and Al Davis worked very closely, and that whole team has always been seen as outsiders. And they push against the league and have fought for player rights for a long ass time. Yeah, man, John Madden is the shit. And now he's in 2 Hall of Fames in Canton, Ohio. The NFL Hall of Fame and the Shacknews Hall of Fame. So congratulations, Mr. Madden, Coach Madden, I should say. And we have discussed Lola Masaya Matsuhura. Dude, this guy is the funkiest game composer out there. He wrote the first 2 Sonic soundtracks, which are bangers. And the reason that he was so funky and like all of his bass lines were so good is because he was part of a J-pop act called a really famous J-pop act called Dreams Come True. So this guy had a lot of like composing and performance chops under his belt before he got tagged to compose for the Sonic the Hedgehog games. But I love Mario's music and stuff like that. But the stuff that gets you grooving and toe tapping is the Sonic the Hedgehog soundtracks. And honestly, I get his stuff stuck in my head all the time. The casino levels, like some of the best like video game music ever written. There you go. I'll keep going down. Masato Nakamura. Have you played, like, we all love Parappa the Rappa, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And obviously he was not just the designer, he was the composer. So this is the guy who made all of your Parappa raps that you love.
They're so good too. Like they're so catchy. I still sing some of that stuff too. Like
I rented that game from Blockbuster and I didn't understand it. I was like, my brain didn't understand what I was supposed to do because I'm like, you press the X, you can actually like he'll repeat the words again and again. So I was just pressing buttons and making him just say the same word over again. It was really confusing for me as a kid. I didn't understand rhythm games.
I'll be in the
songs
kitchen
though.
I'll be in the kitchen cooking, and Sam will hear me go something like mumbling to myself, like "crack, crack, crack the egg into the bowl." And that stuff just like it's earworms. It's all earworms, and it stays with you so much.
Absolutely. Michael Abrash. Am I saying that right?
Michael Abrash. Yeah, he was kind of John Carmack's right-hand man at id Software during the engineering of the Quake engine. That was the first point where John Carmack was like, you know what, I don't know that I can do all this by myself. John Romero is famous as one of the designers at id Software, one of the co-founders. He wrote a lot of the tools and he helped with the engines, but a lot of the like really nitty-gritty stuff in the engine was Carmack. And Carmack actually wooed Michael Abrash from Microsoft It's like, hey, quit making all the windows and that boring stuff. Come make one of the world's first true 3D video games with me. And then they did that. And Quake was notoriously difficult to make. And Michael Abrash went right back to Microsoft when he was done. But now he works at Facebook, working on a lot of the Meta VR stuff. So he's still involved in gaming in a way.
Dopeness. I'm going to keep us moving along. Michiru Yamane. She started with Konami while she was still in college. Most famous, her first role as the main composer was with the Rocket Knight series. I don't know if anyone's familiar with those games on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. They were actually pretty fun platformers. Not the hardest games in the world, but fun to play. But she's probably best known for her work on Symphony of the Night, the Castlevania game. That is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. It's an amazing blend of classical orchestration and Baroque music with rock and roll and funk. And I'm sure if you've played that game before, you know what is up. We got on kind of an actor kick this year, as you can see. While we were talking about people that had played Mario in movies, of course we had to talk about Raul Julia, who was just freaking brilliant as M. Bison. He made that movie. The whole thing is like chewing scenery. It's hamming it up, but shockingly, him as M. Bison works really well, despite his sort of svelte frame.
We got on an actor kick this year because for younger audiences who are living in a golden age of adaptations, it wasn't always that way. The 90s had a lot of movies and shows that stunk, and Street Fighter was one of them. That movie is no good. It has a reputation now as a wonderful bad movie, but it is a bad movie. Raul Julia is not the reason it's a bad movie. He put everything into this. And the story goes that he took the Bison role because his kids love Street Fighter. So he's like, all right, I'm going to take this role and I'm going to give it 110%. And he did. He was so good in this. And the sad thing is he died right before this movie came out. He passed away from stomach cancer. And at the time, people of a certain age like myself were just what a tragedy for him to go out on that. He deserves so much better than to go out on that turd of a movie. But as time went on, it's no, he should be celebrated for making that so much better than it had any right to be. He's so good at what he does, and a lot of his lines are iconic. Asif loves to quote the "of course" line. So many people have adopted his "game over" line. It's so quotable. He's tremendous, and he put everything into this last role. I think he even got some award nominations for it too. And to think of that movie getting any nominations for anything is just inconceivable. But that's how good he was.
Well, he may have been, inducted today, but for him it was just a Tuesday.
See what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, exactly. The Bison. We should all get some Bison bucks printed up.
They're worth £5 British pounds.
That's awesome. 5 British pounds.
This isn't worth the money it's printed. The paper it's printed on.
Man, no, brilliant actor. I think most of us remember him from the Addams Family movies in the 90s too, as Gomez Addams, which he was so delightful as. And I think he could it's interesting because Gomez was a very over-the-top, expressive character, and this movie's over the top, and he's playing Bison over the top and in a completely different way. If that makes any sense.
No, it does.
Yeah, the Bison's a much crueler, more stoic character than the very passionate and lively Gomez. So, he just did a great actor, brilliant guy, and we lost him too soon. But
too soon as usual, yeah, always.
Yeah. All right, Rebecca Heineman.
Yeah, Rebecca Heineman, a.k.a. Burger Becky. Why was she called Burger? Because she would go on coding sprints, and rather than get up to leave and go find something to eat, she would open her desk drawer, pull out a burger from a sack of burgers and eat it and just keep working. But she was one of the founding members of Interplay. She was the lead designer and programmer on Bard's Tale 3. She's done a ton of ports, including Doom on 3DO. She helped get Descent onto Steam within the last several years here. She's done a whole lot. She was one of my favorite inductees in this year's class.
And David, you can probably see more about this. Like having women working in video games in that time period was really rare. I remember reading about that. Like it's super rare. There weren't a lot of them in that industry at that time.
That's correct. Yes, and she takes pretty big stands on a lot of personal political issues within games as well as at large, but in games as well. And it's important to have prominent members of the gaming industry using their voice for that.
Right on. Right. Shinji Hashimoto. What? He was the,
yes. Yeah, Hashimoto got his start in the toy industry, much like Shigeru Miyamoto, and then went to Bandai. And ever since he left Bandai for Square, he's been there and has been at the helm of SquareSoft, now of course Square Enix, on a lot of its biggest projects. So he's touched so many games that have touched so many lives over the past several decades.
Yeah.
Anybody whose credit is on Super Mario RPG gets my seal of approval.
That's right. That's right.
Tim Schafer. Most of us know Day of the Tentacle and Maniac Mansion as like early examples of Tim Schafer stuff. I was a big fan of Full Throttle, personally.
Yeah, it's my favorite adventure game of all time.
Yeah, and after all the LucasArts stuff, he went on to found Double Fine, do a bunch of stuff there, including the Costume Quest series and Brutal Legend with Electronic Arts, a bunch of other stuff. He's just been in the game industry, doing point-and-click adventures and then on to sort of higher concept stuff from there.
He was also one of the first big names to get behind the crowdfunding idea. And when he crowdfunded Broken Age, and of course, like it took him about a decade, but like he eventually did raise the money. He did eventually get Psychonauts 2 done. And that was largely a crowdfunded effort. And he's one of those names that's like at the front of the indie gaming boom. Like I think the indie gaming boom would have happened, but I don't think it would have blown up as much as it did without Tim Schafer and without him kind of helping make that crowdfunding model like more prominent than it was at the time.
Yeah.
And today he still got the Day of the Devs. Double Fine still does the Day of the Devs festival every year, and they bring a lot of indie games to our attention.
He did it again this year, yeah.
Van Mai.
Yes, Morgan Shaver, one of our senior editors, wrote this article. They did a great job. Really went in depth on the history, which is always what we look for in this Hall of Fame. Just kind of giving you a snapshot of these inductees, but just someone who kind of rode the waves of the gaming industry in the 1980s and 90s, especially when things were so turbulent. And it's just a super influential developer, but not one you hear a ton about, which is why we like to, we have a lot of the who's who of developers in our Hall of Fame, but we also like to shine a light on developers, companies, and games that maybe aren't as well known, but still deserve that spotlight and that attention. And Van Mai is one of those.
Yeah, and basically she's disappeared though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a mystery surrounding who she is and where she is now, because they weren't even sure they got her name right.
Yeah, that was so just actually recently this year she surfaced, and Morgan linked to the interview she did with the Video Game History Foundation. And so it's really a great read if you get a chance to check it out. And that's, start with our Hall of Fame because we give a good summary there, and then you can jump into a longer interview.
Yoshihisa Suzuki is another composer that worked on Parappa the Rappa series as
We're on
well.
a Parappa kick this year.
Yeah, I mean, of course we are. Parappa the Rappa is a very unique game, even for a rhythm game, and I think for a lot of people, it was the way they got into that genre. Because it's a rhythm game that isn't DDR. You don't need feet to play it. You don't need to know how to play guitar or anything like that. You just hit the buttons and the rap battles happen. That's basically it. But yeah, it's also just creative. I mean, because it's good. It's cheesy, sure, and it's definitely like family friendly hip hop, but it's still fun. Like you got to make that stuff enjoyable. You got to make the songs catchy. You gotta
super stylized too, like super interesting look of the game as well. Like people were experimenting with that console and the 3D graphics at the time, and it was really out there in terms of visual aesthetic.
Yeah, it was kind of going for almost a graffiti style at the time, and everything was very 2D, like flat panel characters and stuff like that, which is also really unique, almost like stickers. Yeah.
And this came out 2 years before even the first DDR release, at least in the US. Anyway, it came out. DDR didn't come out until 1998, so this was like one of those rhythm games, like Blake said before, it hit its peak with the DDR craziness.
Yuji Naka. Wow. Who? Should probably
let's put aside the no good, very bad year that Yuji Naka has had this year and last year. Before that, he was an influential figure, especially in Sega circles, because he's basically the guy that Sega turned to help prop up their new hardware. Can you come up with something for the Genesis? Can you come up with something for the Saturn? Can you come up with something for the Dreamcast? Can you help, like, we want to do an online game. Can you help us with that? And he delivered every time. Like, I think his work in the 90s, I think, is enough to put him in this category, even with the recent troubles he's had.
Yeah.
I go out on a limb here and say that even his most recent work, Balan Wonderworld, I reviewed that game, and like, as disappointing as it was, I saw what he was going for, and I wished that he had more resources to pursue his vision with that game, because I could see, like, that guy knows how to make a game that's like that, like, ignites the joy and nostalgia of your childhood, and it just kind of it disappoints me to know that we'll never see Balan Wonderworld as he envisioned it, because there is something there and it is charming.
Yeah. Like, to TJ's point, is there's something to be said about experiencing like nights in real time when it came out, and your friend that had a Saturn, when, like, no, they were expensive, only certain kids had them, and it was the first time seeing that level of graphics, like, as a kid is phenomenal. It's laughable now. People look at it and laugh, but like at that time, you had to be there. You really had to be there. It was an incredible experience to fly around in 3D with all those colors and those 3D graphics. It was amazing.
Yeah, there was a buzz around Knights that wasn't there for any other game, because it was going so far above and beyond what was out there in terms of visuals and in terms of like what you could do with 3D gaming. It was a phenomenon at the time.
That's the whole point of the Hall of Fame, is to give them credit where credit's due. It may have not have been the greatest 3D game ever made, but it definitely had significance.
It was the flagship title for that console. Like, that's all there is to it. Like, it was the game that we all saw in the ad that we wanted to try, which made
it was a launch title, I believe.
Saturn. Yeah. And then unfortunately this year, I mean, just very recently, like, he got caught up in some insider trading scandals, and got arrested. But I don't think that discounts all the hard work that he's done in the past.
Yeah.
Especially like, I mean, we just talked about, like, the soundtrack to Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic Frontiers came out this year, and it made top 10 lists for a lot of people on staff here. So I don't think we can discredit, like, his influence on gaming, at the very least. So yeah, but let's keep going down the line. That's it.
So Blake, I have a suggestion here. Since we have about I think 6 other categories, dozens of nominations, or inductees across them.
We can skim from here, I think. Yeah. We're gonna go. Let's see. We're just gonna go to the next chapter of software. We're gonna go through this really quick. AOL Instant Messenger. Everybody used to instant message on AIM. We know that. GameSpy. GameSpy was on the internet. That was the thing. I never really used GameSpy personally. Did anyone here use GameSpy?
Oh yeah.
I didn't even know what it was as a kid. I knew it existed, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
This was like the only way that I knew to play online games back in the day.
The Wii ran on it.
GameSpy servers were like my opening door. I grew up after LAN parties, so like GameSpy was my entry into playing games like Call of Duty Allied Assault Online or like old like modded Half-Life, playing some of that online. Just like the amount of things that played on GameSpy, whether illicit or official, were incredible.
Nice.
And shout out to John Kiefer. We had former staff members that were part of that network.
Right.
MAME. Oh my god, I love MAME. I use MAME on my home cabinet all the time. Fantastic thing that lets you play arcade games that would otherwise kind of be lost to time in a lot of ways if they weren't preserved. And I think that's kind of, I wrote this blurb, and one of the things I kind of talked about is MAME's importance to video game archival projects.
Preservation.
Yeah, it's there's so many things that just nobody is going to remember or care about if MAME doesn't preserve it. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but there's a lot of video games out there that deserve to be remembered and preserved, like no matter how popular they were. There's more out there than just the Street Fighters and I don't know, Sunset Riders of the world. There's a lot of stuff out there, and MAME helps keep that going and helps new generations of gamers discover new games. There we go. Mario Teaches Typing. I learned how to type using Mario Teaches Typing. Like, this taught me how to type. This was it right here. I would not be as quick with the clickety-clacks if it weren't for Mario Teaches Typing.
And to go back to the people category, apparently this was Charles Martinet's first outing as Mario.
You are absolutely correct, Ozzy. It was. And look at where it got us now. Microsoft Office 97, look, I mean, it just brought, like, office work and writing into a digital age. It made it so much easier.
Some of us still use it.
Yeah, there were word processors before this, but this was really, like, bringing that suite of things that you needed onto a computer. Nesticle, another emulator, and we just talked about the importance of emulation. Nesticle, I think, was a door opener for a lot of people. I got in trouble because I downloaded Nesticle and I kept downloading ROMs onto floppy disks in the computer lab at my school, and I got banned from using the computer there for 2 weeks because of it. But what's funny is the teacher's assistants working there. She asked me how to do it all. Like, she had me, like, get games for her boyfriend and stuff like that. It was pretty amusing. I was using this back on my PCs back in the day. Great little thing. Oh my goodness, Netscape Navigator. That little, you're just like looking, is the world still turning? Am I still online? Is it happening? Netscape Navigator was the first browser that a lot of us ever used. I think we can leave it at that. I don't think we need to go too deep into Netscape Navigator. Winamp really whoops the llama's ass, man. What more do you really need to say about Winamp? Oh my god, Winamp is how everybody listened to music on their computers. You just drag and drop your MP3 collection into the playlist, put it on random, and go about your day. I don't think visualizers were added until 1998, though, right? But
correct.
Oh man, did I love Winamp? The thing, you know what else I used Winamp for before like streaming services were a thing? There were channels that would live stream television shows. And you couldn't control what shows they watched, but like they would put stuff like The Simpsons and Trailer Park Boys up there, and you just watch a channel as it would play through random episodes in the background of your existence, sort of like what we do now with like live stream broadcasting. But yeah, I mean, and that EQ system made everybody feel like they were a sound engineer. Winamp, it's just a great product. I miss it. I can't even remember the last time. Like, when did we say goodbye to Winamp? Like, do you even remember, like, one day you just didn't use Winamp anymore?
Winamp was going strong up through my Guilty Gear X2 days because I remember one of my favorite things about it was that you could create skins for Winamp, and I had a skin for Winamp made based on my main in the game at the time.
Man,
it was just funny how many skins were made for that game and just how much you could do with it.
dude, I love the custom. I had a Pac-Man skin for my Winamp. So like all the like EQs were ghosts and pellets everywhere. Oh, it was so great. And apparently it's still around too. You can still download Winamp. They just put out version 5.9 in September. So there you go. WinZip and WinRAR. Oh.
How did all you guys have these many computers when this stuff was coming out? Like, we didn't even get a computer until like early 2000s. Like, because they were all super expensive, and the only person who had one was my uncle who worked in IT. That was the only time I had access to a computer before 2001.
School. A lot of times school and like cheap hand-me-down computers for me.
School, and I had an uncle in IT and in the games industry, actually. So I was pretty fortunate. He sent me a new computer.
There's a pattern with the IT uncles.
Yeah, I've had a computer since I was a kid, but I was definitely, at that time, the kid on the block who was fortunate enough to have one. So
yeah.
We'll be right back.
All right, WinZip and WinRAR, we know what these tools do and why they're useful. I think we can scuttle right past that. And let's see, let's go up to the next category.
Huzzah for compression.
I don't think we should do like every single inductee in every category. I think it might be more interesting if we go through each category, and each of us, since there are three of us here who wrote some of these, we could each pick two that we want to talk about, because there's more for people here to read. That's why we wrote the entries. So if we start at since we started with people, we were near the beginning. If we go to companies, Blake, what's one of the companies you wrote for in this category that meant a lot to you?
Oh, eBay? No. eBay doesn't. I mean, I'm proud of eBay. Sucker Punch for sure means a lot to me. I love Ghost of Tsushima. And Sucker Punch got their start with the Sly Cooper series as well, which is a great way to start, man. Just coming out with a banger right out the gate. And they just kept going from there. Sly Cooper had several titles. I think, didn't they just release a compilation of them, or one's coming?
That was fairly recently. And I'm glad we got to induct Sucker Punch, because it's one of those companies where like every now and then you'll hit on a franchise that does so well that kind of becomes your thing for years afterwards, right? Like for a while it was Infamous, which is also great, and more recently Spider-Man, but a lot of people might not know how they got started. Like the Sly Cooper games are so good, so it's really cool to dig into their history.
Yeah. No. Well, actually, no. Sly Cooper wasn't their first game. I'm sorry. It was Rocket Robot on Wheels, which was...
Sly Cooper was when they came onto my radar, so that's what I always think about with Sucker Punch.
But I mean, yeah, it was their first PlayStation title. Like they did one game for the N64 before this, and then they've basically been partnered with Sony up until they bought them. Infamous. I think it was after Infamous 2, like that Sony decided that they were going to bring them internal. And I mean, they've just been working for him anyway, so I think that's a perfect marriage. And man, Ghost of Tsushima was my game of the year when it came out, and I was just playing it last night, actually. And I really dug Infamous 2. Like, I played the living crap out of Infamous 2 and Second Son. Really enjoyable games. They do the good or evil path stuff really well.
They did that really well, and mobility was so fun in those games. Like I loved just like grinding along power lines, grinding along railroad tracks. Movement was just so fun.
Yeah. And then Tiger Electronics, I like their handheld LCDs. No one else really cares. David, is there one you want to talk about?
I think we all have some fond memories, because maybe that was all you had. Like before I had a Game Boy or an NES, I was playing Tiger games, right? And so like you just make do. But I guess the company I'll talk about for this category, Funko Land. Funko Land represents a time before GameStop's still doing a lot. They're one of the most fascinating companies to follow today, but for very different reasons, I think. Funko Land, it was a chain, but it was a chain before chains felt so homogenized, I guess. I remember they had this huge tome of like used game prices. They had games from almost every system that was out at the time, all the way back to like Atari and NES. And I just really loved going there. I bought my N64 at Funko Land, and my first game was Duke Nukem 64, of all games to choose. So
remember
yeah,
they had a pamphlet they could hand you. It would have all these imported titles that you could purchase, but you'd have to call the number and order it or send in a form to get. That's how I got all the Dragon Ball Z games for PlayStation, because they sold imported games, which is still, I mean, they were pretty hard to find for a long time, you know, even through eBay.
Yeah, I feel like when GameStop acquired them through a series of M&As, I remember when they were like, okay, we were no longer going to carry any games older than, like, I think it was PlayStation 2 or 1. And I got it. Like, by that time, there were enough platforms out that they needed space. But it was also kind of the end of an era, because I'm like, oh, man, I loved seeing Super Mario Brothers on sale for 40 cents, which is one thing I remember about Funko Land. Ozzy, what did you write
EB
about
Games after that too? Is Funko Land, EB Games, then GameStop? Is that the like transcending order of their brand?
I think so. And then Babbage's was wrapped up in there. Software, etc., was wrapped up in there too, I believe. Yeah, so many stores all kind of got merged into one.
The kids today won't know the effort of having to fill out a form, put it in an envelope, mail it, wait 6 to 8 weeks, and then get a game.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
find out it didn't play on the system because you had an American system.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
What's region locked? You couldn't Google.
That's right.
You're just screwed.
Neversoft, I have a soft spot for, because not just because of the Tony Hawk games, but yeah, exactly.
It's always soft spot for Neversoft.
People remember Neversoft for the Tony Hawk games and for the Spider-Man games, but like I definitely remember them as picking up the baton for Guitar Hero once Activision picked up the license. And while the later Guitar Heroes are not going to be remembered as fondly as Rock Band, but I thought Neversoft did a great job with those games. And I'm not just saying that because I was a tester on them.
Not just because. Asif also wrote about Blockbuster, which was hugely formative for me. I remember I know, man. Yeah, I think that was the first place where I tried a Nintendo 64, not in the store, but you could rent one there. My friends and I rented one for a weekend, I think. You had to put a lot of money down, or a credit card. It was a tough sell to my parents, but it was really cool to take home an N64 for a weekend.
Right, does anyone remember when Pokemon Snap first released, and Blockbuster had those stations where you could develop your pictures that you took?
Sticker station, right. Yeah. Oh my God, yes.
That was pretty brilliant. David, I was looking for a Virtual Boy for a while, and like the ones on eBay that come with the Blockbuster cases are highly sought after.
Wow.
Yeah. But no, I mean, everybody went to Blockbuster to rent games. Like, you were there, and I mean, not just games, movies too. Like, it was just a place you would end up going once or twice a week, you know? You'd rent something, and then it was time to take it back, or it sucked, or you watched it, and you'd go and you'd drop it off, and you'd pick up something else. And that was the cycle. They also had a few exclusives, like the Final Fight version, the SNES version of Final Fight. They had the version that had Guy, and that was like you could only rent it from Blockbuster.
Oh, I never knew that. That's cool.
Here.
Yeah, just cool little stuff like that. And then, unfortunately, they just put out a Blockbuster TV series on Netflix, and it was atrocious.
It's bad.
It's really bad. They decided to take it and put it in modern days. So it's like the last Blockbuster ever, and like everybody's talking about like TikToks and stuff like that, but still somehow it's like a hub for a small town. I don't know. It just didn't work. It's like they could have had it during like the Blockbuster boom, which would have made a lot more sense and made it like more of a period piece. But I don't know.
They did a documentary that was like fantastic about the last Blockbuster. It was great to watch. Nicole and I watched that together. And that show, fell flat. You're like, why would you do it today. Like, you should do it in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. But man, Blockbuster Video, wow, what a difference.
The only thing that I need from
I see what you did there.
Like, I'm completely done with the Blockbuster for the most part. The only thing I need is if somebody wanted to go out and encapsulate the scent of a Blockbuster in like one of those air freshener trees, I would buy that by like box.
Same.
Smells like nostalgia.
God damn, man. I can't believe, like, you got me longing for the smell of Blockbuster now. Bravo.
Yeah, now I'm sitting here remembering what it felt like to walk in. But
no, in the 90s, we would have wanted to smell a Blockbuster. What are you guys talking about?
It depends on which Blockbuster and which part of the city, because some of them Blockbusters.
True.
Ooh,
God,
boy.
when someone was out and you had to beg your mom to go across the other town to go to that one to see if they had it. Oh,
yeah.
God, the pain was real.
Let's see.
So, you know, Super Smash Brothers. They might have it at the one on L Street. Okay.
So, Blake, our next category is extraordinary thing. What is extraordinary thing?
Me, David, me. No, an extraordinary thing is anything that we feel deserves some accolades or acknowledgement, but doesn't really fit in any of these categories. It could be a cultural phenomenon, something from the zeitgeist at the time. It could just be something that changed the way we thought about gaming or push things forward. Here we go. Extraordinary things. The BattleTech pods, virtual worlds. This was like early VR stuff. I read about it. We can skip that. The boot disc. Holy cow! Wow.
This is one I nominated and was really happy to write about. Playing computer games back in the DOS days, you couldn't just. It wasn't plug and play, so to speak. You really had to know your way around hardware and how to use your operating system to enable or disable hardware, because every piece of hardware consumed a different amount of memory. And I learned a ton about computers just by making boot disks and reading, almost memorizing every line of config.sys and autoexec.bat, and it kind of led me into programming from there. I was just really interested in how all this stuff works.
Yeah, boot disks were essential if you were gonna do stuff back then.
Yeah.
If you were gonna try and experiment or mess around with anything, you were gonna need that boot disk. Let's see. Oh my God, Clippy! I got to talk about Clippy.
Oh my God, he's so useless.
Hey, Blake, I see you're talking about Clippy. Like,
would I like
is there anything I can do to help you with that?
Yeah.
No, let me do my work.
No, I mean,
get out of the way, dragging him. Get out of the way.
I don't think anybody remembers how intrusive Clippy was.
That's basically it. Clippy tried their damnedest to be helpful, but there's only so much. Anthropomorphic paperclip with no mouth and just two dead eyes and some eyebrows staring at you can do. It's just your digital assistant, and it would pop up and be like, oh, it looks like you're trying to write a resume. Do you want some help? And it try and suggest templates and things you can do for your documents. People really got annoyed with Clippy. Basically, every time Clippy pop up, they'd be like, what the hell? Because Clippy would slow you down.
There's an early 2000s Family Guy joke where Stewie's on a computer and that Clippy shows up and he goes, go away, Paperclip, no one likes you.
Yeah,
that's how I felt about Clippy.
I like the Office episode one where who was trying to write a resume? I don't know, but they call somebody for assistance and they're like, "Yeah, I was looking for that little paperclip guy that helps you write a resume." I think his name was Clippy, and that's the thing is everyone calls him Clippy. But that's not what the actual name of the product was. It was Clip It. But
I did not know that until I read through your entry as I was inputting it. And I was like, oh.
Terrible marketing on their end.
Whoa.
Terrible.
Yeah. I mean, Clippy's basically showed up as like the butt of jokes in a lot of sitcoms and things like that. But I mean, what a time it was. Good old Clippy. We'll always have those memories of my computer suddenly chugging to a halt and wondering why. And it's slowly a jangled animation of a paperclip behind a piece of paper pops up and asks me if I need help. And I'm like, yeah, I need my computer to stop slowing down. let's see. Did you want to talk about any of these, Ozzy? Or
let's see.
What about the marketing campaign for Clay Fighter 63 and a third?
Which is so interesting because it's one of the earliest instances of using bull shots to market your game. And it really helped people become like more cautious readers, more informed readers, because like we got sold a bill of goods with that Clay Fighter ad campaign. And by the time like 63 and a third came out, it really wasn't good. And half of the stuff that they put in like the Nintendo Power Maxis, it didn't show up. It wasn't there. Like there were entire characters that were like, that didn't make the game. And they're like, oh, that's right there in the preview. Like, okay. But yeah, it's a weird phenomenon. And just going down that rabbit hole is really interesting.
Yeah.
Muscles actually has a really interesting video about it on YouTube. If you look up his Clay Fighter stuff.
Yeah, the funniest thing about the marketing for each of those games is they just completely ripped off Mortal Kombat. Like, I think Mortal Kombat 2's marketing slogan was "Prepare yourself," and then Clay Fighter 2's was "We're prepared." And then 63 and a third was great because it was an N64 game, but they didn't want to just follow the title 64 nomenclature. And so I love that it was 63 and a third.
I will always appreciate that they put Earthworm Jim in there, though.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Earthworm Jim was perfect for that. And Asif had one of my favorite entries in this category, which was South Park. South Park is 25 years old now, which is wild.
Wow.
And they've had a lot of gaming episodes. Like I'm surprised at how many they had.
Well, it's pop culture, right? They always pick fun of what's ever trending, so like it's a big thing now. It wasn't always, but it had
the World of Warcraft episode is like a Hall of Fame. It's like Hall of Fame
great, yeah.
myself.
It's so
great. Oh man, the Stick of Truth.
That's my favorite video game based episode. I love the WoW episode, but Stick of Truth, like it spawned one of my favorite games. But the episode in and of itself was just like fantastic.
Yeah, really well done.
Cartman traveling through time because he wanted a Wii.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one too. Didn't want to wait.
They're trying to get the Okama Game Sphere.
That's right.
Episode.
Yeah.
That's the Is that the Tally episode? I think that's the Tally episode.
It might
right?
be.
Might be.
Yeah.
There's the Guitar Hero episode where they're just like playing a plastic guitar with no music at a restaurant. It's like, I love this song.
Yeah.
There's the Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars on Nintendo DS episode, where they're trying to get that. Like, it's
the episode where they parent lock all of the computers, or no, the TVs,
because it was how do you train a horse in Minecraft, and all the parents had to learn how to play Minecraft, and then they started to build the town, and they were yelling at everyone for being griefers. It was hilarious.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, obviously
South Park has had better gaming episodes, and gaming has had South Park games. At least the early ones. The early South Park games are garbage.
Yeah. I know. I have a soft spot for South Park 64. That game is great.
I mean,
it's Rock, but South Park.
Yeah. You can have a soft spot for that game if you must, Greg.
It wasn't a good game, Greg, but it was a funny. It at least had the humor at the time down. It was very early in the South Park.
South Park then and South Park now is like night and day.
History, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see like how the 64 game reflects them at the times versus how the Stick of Truth is like the more modern, like the leaps and bounds both in game wise and in the show wise. I've actually been rewatching like old episodes of South Park, like on HBO Max, just like putting it on in the background and stuff like that. Yeah,
before it gets taken off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it getting taken off? Probably
at some point.
I'm gonna log into HBO Max one day and be like, we took everything off,
and it's gone.
Yeah,
it's gone. There's another.
Another South Park reference. Nice. Street Fighter the movie. Wow. Okay. We don't need to talk about that. One thing I love that we put Lee Carvella's putting challenge in here.
That was Ozzy's.
Yeah.
To credit to Asif, this is actually his idea to induct it.
And it was a tough call because it was this or Bone Storm, so we had to choose.
Buy me Bone Storm or go to hell.
really quick, I mean, there's a lot of fantastic things in here.
Ooh, do we want to say anything about the railgun?
Oh, I think we kind
Yeah.
of have to.
Yeah, Railgun, man, definitely extraordinary thing. So I think the first game to use one was technically Shadow Warrior, but it came out just a few months before Quake 2 in '97. Quake 2's Railgun is still, I think, the best Railgun. The sound effect, the punch of that hit. It was that game's sniper rifle, even though you couldn't zoom in with it, but you didn't need to. The Railgun is phenomenal. And we also, just kind of adjacent, we wrote about QuakeCon and LAN parties as well, which are both extraordinary things and facets of gaming culture.
That is correct. I don't know. It's all so tied into it, man. I remember playing Quake at LANs. That was the only place I was playing Quake was LAN parties because I didn't have a good computer at the time when LAN parties were bumping at my age.
Right, right.
Yeah. Let's see. I also think, we got Magic and the Gathering in here, but we also have Dungeons and Dragons, and we wouldn't have Magic the Gathering without Dungeons and Dragons. We wouldn't have most fantasy games. If you like Skyrim, you better kiss the ring, like Dungeons and Dragons ring, man. It wouldn't exist without that. So many RPGs, every RPG ever wouldn't exist. Baldur's Gate 3, everyone's hyped about that. Oh, guess what? That's a D&D game. It is the granddaddy of tabletop RPGs. Gary Gygax really outdid himself with it. What can I say?
Is that Gorp? Is that like Gorp was a thing too, right? Did that come out before Dungeons and Dragons at the same time, or did it
good old raisins and peanuts? You're talking about trail mix here? No, I know what you're talking about. I think you're talking about GURPS, Greg. I think
GURPS. Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's a weird algorithm.
Yeah, I think GURPS did exist before Dungeons and Dragons, but who cares?
But D&D is like what refined that system, right? They're like, oh, they got a good idea. Let's refine it.
Yeah, D&D. It's the world building that it did, Greg. It's the world building. It took a lot of like Tolkien themes and concepts and immersed you in that fantasy world, and it's just been going strong ever since. I've been playing ever since the pandemic started. I've been playing D&D campaign with my friends. It's a great creative exercise. It's when you play a video game, you kind of know what's going to happen at certain points or what to expect. When you're playing D&D, most of the world exists inside of your brain, and you're being painted a picture by a dungeon master, and you can do basically anything. Like the last time I played D&D, there was I put a bunch of meat and cheese into a bucket that I found in a room, and then we got attacked by guard dogs, and I threw out the meat and cheese and successfully got us away from the guard dogs. And you don't know that's going to happen. It's just an organic experience that you did something in the game and it had an effect later, randomly. Stuff like that's phenomenal. I think as a writer, it's also a great tool. If you're blocked and you're trying to come up with something creative, go play some D&D with your friends and do some problem solving, do some adventuring, and you'll be chock full of ideas afterwards. There we go. I think we can moved on. Let's see, where haven't we been yet?
You might want to say video. Yeah, video games for last.
CD burners did amazing things. I don't know if we need to talk about it too much. We all know what CD burners did and why they're important. Controller.
I don't think people do today. I don't think they know what CD burners are. Or how about they came in different sizes, and when you bought one and it was the wrong size for your computer, it wouldn't fit. You couldn't fit it. You had
that happened to me once, and
yeah, me too. It sucked.
So irritating.
I was like, "There's sizes? Like what?"
Also, there's CDR and CDRW. You had to make sure you had the right type.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the different formats.
I remember I insisted for years, for 10 years, every computer I bought, I had two drives. One that just read, meaning, a traditional drive, but another burner. That way I didn't have to first burn an image to my hard drive and then copy the image onto a disk. I could just copy from one disk to the other for purely legal things, I assure you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I most certainly did not pirate hundreds of PlayStation games when I had a CD copy. Certainly did not do anything like that.
No.
But it was also nice for gaming. Like if you CD burner didn't just burn games, right? Like if you had a 2-disc game, you could just pop both discs in there. You never had to swap out. It's kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. You also,
awesome.
yeah, you could put, if you had a movie you'd made or something on your computer, you could put it onto a disc as well. I mean, this is obviously something you owned, not pirated or anything like that. You could burn them onto that. They were super helpful, man, especially as a musician. As an independent musician, man, let me tell you, like, the first CDs I ever sold were, like, made off of, like, 50-pack spindles I bought. And then you would have the, like, label maker thing, so you'd have the stickers you'd print out. You would put the sticker on the thing and then stick the disc on and pop the sticker on. And then that stuff would get stuck in people's CD drives and car CD players. And then they would ask you about it. You'd be like,
that's pretty much how it went down. That's true.
Yeah.
One of the entries I wrote. So Nintendo gets a lot of flack, often deservedly, and they have since like 2001 for not being current with the internet trends, online gaming trends. But they were trying. Once upon a time, they were trying pretty hard. And I got to write about the Satellaview, which was only released in Japan. Ozzy, I think you're nodding. You're probably familiar with this. But it was a satellite modem that you could use to download games onto blank cards. Not any games. They would have certain games that were only available for a limited time. And there was actually a Zelda remake that was exclusive to the Satellaview. It's called BS
it's the
Zelda.
Unicorn for me. I was never able to find it.
I was never able to find it either. I know there are a lot of endeavors, like fan-made endeavors, trying to complete it. But the idea was it was Zelda 1, but with a Link to the Past style engine. Although Link, I don't remember what color hair he had. I don't remember if it was purple, because he had purple in Link to the Past on SNES. But it was broadcast satellite. So I included that, but I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. But yeah, there was BS this and BS that, which is kind of an unfortunate acronym for 13 and 14-year-old kids to read about. But it was a really cool idea, and it didn't last that long, but it was very forward-thinking of Nintendo to try this. And I think if it would have come to the States, which was a little bit ahead of the curve as far as the internet went, things might have played out a little differently here. Who can say for sure? But
is it like worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, David? Like if you have one or find one of these on the wild, like is it like insanely expensive now?
That's
so
a good question. I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of this stuff, if you acquire it, you could just leave it in the packaging or you could use it. The Satellaview is inoperable since the service is down. So if you get one, you really can't do anything with it. But that's a good question. I suppose you could go hunting on eBay to see if there are any. But yeah, really interesting piece of hardware by Nintendo.
That's interesting. I actually didn't even know about this until the Hall of Fame, which is
on a similar note,
nerdy shit.
I know it was cool, and like I remember reading about. I also wrote about the X-band modem for Super NES and Genesis, but this is a way to play 16-bit games online. For this Mortal Kombat book, I wrote about two guys who had this rivalry in Mortal Kombat 2, not in arcades. They were playing the Genesis version of Mortal Kombat 2 over X-band, which was just horrible lag. If you play fighting games even now, you know that you often have to change your style and your plans based on latency. And they were doing this
somehow
back
less
when,
lag than a Smash game.
that's probably true. But you had to pay for it. But I mean, this had leaderboards. You had an online handle. Like, it was pretty cool for the time. I never got to try one, but I remember reading about it and being like, man, I would love to play one of these. You could also play games like Super Mario Kart multiplayer online. And again, this wasn't Nintendo exclusively, but they were out there trying, man. They were trying their best before they stopped trying.
David, you can buy one for $300.
Oh, it's a Satellaview?
Yep.
That's not bad.
Honestly, not bad.
No. It'd probably be more if it was still functional, but it's a neat thing.
Man, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Tamagotchi. These things are still going strong. Incredible concept. Little digital pets that are on these tiny little egg keychains that you just feed and you clean up their poop and you play with them and they grow and they evolve. Very Pokemon-like in a lot of ways. And there have been like Pokemon Tamagotchis as well. Not Tamagotchi brand, but similar concept. I think they were made by Tiger, but there was like a Pikachu one with a pedometer in it. where like the more you walked, the stronger you could make your Pikachu.
And people would shake them.
Yeah.
Or our friends would put them in paint mixers and have them bounce around and then in like foam. And so they
we
get
were
super high up.
We would do that on our lunch breaks at Target back when we were kids because, I worked in the toy department at Target. So, of course, I bought one with my like employee discount. And you'd just be shaking it all the time. I think one day it woke me up like while I was trying to sleep and I threw it across the room or something.
Oh, no.
And then it just was like lost in a pile of crap for a while, and I finally found it. And the battery was dead. But no, Tamagotchi's been fun. I actually bought one recently and like kept it alive for quite a while. I had a little baby snake friend for a little bit, and then they've been doing a lot of interesting licenses. They put out a series of Evangelion Tamagotchis, so you would have like the angels from Evangelion as your pets, or the Evangelions themselves. They put out an R2-D2 one for Star Wars recently, and there's a Hello Kitty one they put out like a year or two ago.
Are they shaped like the characters, like R2-D2? Is it shaped like him, or is it just on a screen still?
It's an egg, but the egg is painted like R2-D2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The Pac-Man one's really cool because the Pac-Man one comes with a Pac-Man case to put it in.
Oh, okay.
And you know me and my love of Pac-Man, so of course I'm going to have a Tamagotchi Pac-Man. I do. But there you go. Just wanted to give that a shout out.
Also, Ozzy, did you write about Super Game Boy?
No, that was me.
That was you?
That would be Blake, but yeah, I get where you're going with this.
Dude, look.
Yeah,
like
so special.
Here's basically what I said. The Super Game Boy, in a lot of ways, is the precursor to the Nintendo Switch. And it shows just how forward-thinking Nintendo is as a company. Basically, you would take your portable games on your Game Boy, you put them into the Super Game Boy, and you would have them enhanced with, like, color options. Some games even took it really further and had, like, full color palettes for the games themselves. Like, I think it was Mario versus Donkey Kong. Or it might have just been Donkey Kong on the
They would have, like, custom palettes where, like, you could change them, but also, like, developers started, like, creating palettes.
Yeah, you saw it in Donkey Kong 94, and then you saw it in Link's Awakening.
I was going to name that one. I couldn't remember if it was true or not. And I think Mario Land 2 as well.
And personally, I loved playing Donkey Kong Land on this thing. Yeah. Because Donkey Kong Land is a great game, but like the Game Boy, like the screen just doesn't help it a lot. Like, but when you put it in the Super Game Boy, it looks crystal clear, and I was able to enjoy it a lot more on my own TV.
Yeah, and where you see where they are now with the Switch, you can't just help but think like Nintendo is thinking about this stuff years ahead of anybody, I mean, the Game Boy is still basically the handheld that everybody looks to as iconic. People don't remember the Lynx or the Game Gear as much, or the TurboGrafx 16 one. Like, everyone had handhelds, but none of them were the Nintendo Game Boy. So them, like, sort of reversing that and taking the portable game and making it for the home console. Like, now you have the Switch, where it's like the best of both worlds. Now you can dock it on your home console and play it on a big TV, or you can take the handheld console anywhere you want to go. Only now it's not two separate games or two separate consoles you're buying, rather,
right.
Or two separate games.
Isn't the Game Boy like the best-selling console like of all time?
Game Boy was somewhere for a while. Yeah, I think PS2 eclipsed it. What's that, TJ?
I was gonna say it's still up there as far as like Nintendo's best-selling things.
Yeah, Blake, I think that's actually a really good point. It's a great entry. I read that one as well and really liked it. And also, the cool thing is they did this one more time. For GameCube, I had the Game Boy Player where you could play GBA cartridges on your GameCube, which was pretty cool.
I need that. I can't wait. I need that for my collection, David. That's a missing thing. I've seen it a few times in stores, but it's always been more than I felt like spending that day.
Yeah, it's pricey.
The first time I even learned about it was at the Exchange when I came to visit y'all in Canton. I'd never seen one before, and that's definitely on my list. If it's still there, David, go get it for me.
I will check. What were you saying, Ozzy?
I can't wait to get to that in the future Hall of Fame, the GBA player and the things that Nintendo tried out and instances where they were way ahead of their time.
Yeah. Absolutely, but yeah, shout
I
out
mean,
to the
they
Super
had
Game
the
Boy.
Nintendo Wii in 1989 with the Power Glove. That concept was there. Like, you
It's
know
so
what I mean? Like, that's
bad.
insane.
Yeah.
It didn't work very well, but my God, it was there.
Didn't work at all.
But it was
So-
there though. Like that idea had already
No,
been
I know the idea is
made.
there.
All
But
Yeah.
right, we've done companies, we've done extraordinary
Hmm.
things. We've done hardware devices. Was this hardware devices?
This
We
is
just did
hardware.
hardware
We can move
devices,
on
I
to media.
Yeah. All right. These are just some of the things we grew up reading. Basically, in a lot of instances, that's not all there is. But computer gaming world. Did
Yeah, I
anyone?
also wrote that one.
I did not grow up reading computer gaming world because like I did not have a computer for gaming necessarily.
No,
Back when
neither did I. Yeah, but it was still like you were so desperate for news. You know, if you didn't have internet connection, because at the same time, internet connections were fairly rare. If you had 56K, and the only way to get news was magazines. Begging my mom to buy me GamePro or Computer Gaming World just to find out what was coming out in the next 3 months.
That's
we
true.
also had
We wrote about Jeff Keighley. He actually got his start as a journalist. I remember when I wrote Stay While and Listen, his deep dives into Blizzard were fantastic. Like that guy's still a heck of a writer. He just doesn't get a chance to do a lot of it. And Insider Magazine was one that I think made the rest of the Council of the Old go, huh? But it was an interesting. A lot of computer magazines during the Apple II era, they would print code listings over like 12 pages. And if you typed that code into Apple Basic, which every Apple II had, it was a way to learn how to program because oftentimes there were typos, so you'd have to debug, but then that gave you a playable game. And it's especially noteworthy because John Romero's first game was published in an issue of Apple Insider Magazine. So it was pretty cool to include.
nice.
Edge magazine, which is on here as well. Back in that day of magazines in the early 90s, they were all about tips, tricks, previews, and fluff pieces. But Edge always did a deep dive on a game in a time when deep dives were unheard of. And like the stuff that we take for granted today, like the behind the scenes stuff that we see on YouTube, or like the long form features here on Shacknews or on other sites like Polygon, like Edge got that ball rolling. And the influence that Edge had was tremendous.
Nice. Dude, Famitsu, we got to talk about Famitsu.
Famitsu, yep.
This might be the most influential gaming magazine ever, honestly. Yeah, I don't know. Famitsu's still out there doing their thing to this day and like still breaking stories. Still
breaking stories. And when you hear like remember, like when before a Nintendo game comes out, there's a buzz like, oh, Famitsu gave this a 40, which is like I think there's like their top score because they have 4 editors assign games a rating of 1 through 10. And like to your point, Blake, like Famitsu, people are like, oh, if this gets good buzz in Famitsu, that like raises expectations,
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that available in the US?
I don't think so. It's Japanese only.
Yeah, it's always been Japanese. You had to know
everything we get from Famitsu is translated basically.
Yeah.
Or we have to run it through the Google Translate.
The only time I saw Famitsu growing up is like if like there were like a couple of Japanese kids at my school that would have the magazines. And that was actually they had the Super Famicom before it came out here too. So like that was always cool. I would get like a peek at things before they came out every once in a while because of them.
They would be the ones who would get to talk to Iwata and Sakurai and Miyamoto and those guys.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like Famitsu is revered and respected within the game industry in Japan as well, which is very uncommon. Like, a lot of people that don't talk to media will still talk to Famitsu. Yeah, definitely a good thing. I want to give a quick shout out. PlayStation Magazine, or PSM, was like one of the greatest indie publications in the 90s. One of my favorite magazines of all time.
Yes.
I would get every issue. I loved it so much. And the nice thing is like when they were reviewing games that I'd played, they were hitting the same complaints I had or the same, things I praised were usually in that review. So I really trusted him when they came to their opinions on things, which is, it's difficult to find like voices that like resonate with you sometimes, especially when it comes to critical things. Yeah. So I always really appreciated that about PSM. They started off indie and eventually were like bought by Sony and brought in internally. But yeah, I just loved everything about it. The artwork, the vibrance of their covers, because they would
I was
have,
gonna say like their layout. They had like this attitude,
yeah.
this like almost like punk rock attitude to the magazine that I absolutely loved. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, it's what I loved about it too, and I wanted to really make sure they got some love here today. But
Man,
yeah,
I miss demo discs in the magazine.
right.
Like I
Yeah.
really do. That was like it's such a bygone time because like everything is digital now. But like
It was how you got news, and you get news now years in advance. Like this was like the game's coming out next week, and you're like, what?
Well, to TJ's point, the demo disc, like after consoles stopped shipping with games, I remember when I got a PlayStation, it came with a demo disc. I just played that thing to death, and I would look forward to new issues of magazines because who knows when I would have money from my paper out to get a new game, but I could play these demos.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
That's everything but video games, then, right, fellas?
Yeah, I think so.
Here we go.
And the main event.
Here's the big one.
Time to feel old. Let's do this.
I've been saving one for TJ. TJ, we inducted the King of Fighters 97.
Nice.
This year. And I thought you might want to tell us a little bit about what makes King of Fighters 97 special.
King of Fighters 97 was like the end of a chapter for that series. Like not only was it I do believe that 98 is when they did like the compilation of all the fighters they'd had up to that point, but 97 was like the end of the Orochi saga, which for those who don't know, there's like King of Fighters has had like maybe 3 or 4 different major arcs since it first came out in I think 96. Or maybe that was no, it was maybe a little bit earlier. But
the Orochi saga definitely started in like 95, and it went on for like more than one game. It went on for like 3 games.
Yeah, and like that saga, the end of that saga in 97 is largely considered to make it like one of the better ones out there. It was a huge cast of characters. It was the characters in some of their best forms. You had crazy stuff like secret bosses like Blood Iori, who is like it's Iori when he's in the blood rage from the Orochi curse. You had Chris, Shermie, and Yashiro, who is the Orochi team. Everybody and like those characters, everything about this game was like a perfect final chapter of that era before they moved on to the next big thing, and it's such a good game.
Yeah, I figured you'd want to speak to it.
We got a lot of good ones to go through here. Some that we're going to need to definitely talk about. Let's see, Maniac Mansion. We talked about Tim Schafer earlier, so I'm not sure how much we need to get into this, but this was kind of the point and click adventure that put him on the map right here. And you can put a hamster in a microwave, which I don't think you could really do today.
I think that might have been censored in the NES port, like to that extent. But it was pretty cool to see. Like you, Blake. I kind of associated adventure games with the PC back then, so it was kind of cool to see Maniac Mansion on Nintendo. Like I had a friend who had that and King's Quest V on NES, and it was cool just to see those reaching more people.
Nice.
So, fun fact, David, it's still in the NES version. Only certain characters will do it. And like some of the characters in the game have scruples, and they will not do it. They have morals. A couple of them don't, and I think it's the punk rock girl and the punk rock guy that will do it.
Hey,
okay, that's cool.
That's so out of character for punk rockers. Punk rockers.
Well, and if the son catches you with the hamster after you do that, he will outright kill that character.
Ooh.
Look.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Punk rocker. It ain't punk rock to microwave hamsters. I just want to say that.
They've been stereotyped for sure in that game.
You don't know Jack. Oh my god. This is a game where you get people that don't play games to play games. Like, that's still going today.
You're right. That's a perfect description, honestly. Yeah.
And people still want more You Don't Know Jack. Like I would take a new one today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they've kind of integrated it. Like, there's at least one game in each integration of Jackbox Party Pack that's really just all about the trivia. And so they've sort of integrated it into different games in the Jackbox Party Pack at this point. But, yeah,
The last time we saw You Don't Know Jack was Party Pack 5, and they're going to get to 10 next year, and I think we'll see a new one. That's just my guess.
Cool. Yeah, but I mean, you really can't. It's just fun. The games are spot on. Not all the mini games always hit it out of the park, but you're gonna you buy a party pack, you're gonna enjoy a majority of it at the very least. I was just playing Battle Rap and Robots the other night with some friends, and I didn't win, so I don't know.
You gotta have a certain crowd for that.
Rigged. You don't know it is of a time and place. That's all I think we really need to get into with Yonoid. You can read my entry. This is the game that I push for. I sincerely love the Yonoid game, but we don't need to get too into it now because we have so much to go over. Worms, oh man, another great party game. My personal favorite version of Worms is Worms Armageddon.
Yeah.
You get the holy hand grenade and stuff, but this game is just over the top 2D tactical combat.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways. So yeah, I love the Worm series.
A lesson in physics as well, just how difficult it was to operate the thrust, the angle, I don't know if the early ones had it, but later ones had it where you would also deal with weather conditions.
Oh yeah,
affect your shots.
Mm-hmm.
Just you could learn physics from this game.
Losing a game of Worms is the worst, and winning a game of Worms is totally the freaking best. You feel like you really outsmarted everybody because you did. And there's so many points. So, I can't, there's just countless points where you're playing this game with friends, and, they see you doing something, and the bargaining begins. Right? They're like, no, my last word, please leave him alone. And then they sadistically knock him off the edge, just shove him. That's the most insulting thing when someone kills you with a shove in a game of Worms. They just push you into the water. Oh man, Worms are good times.
That is a great game. One of my favorite games on this list, which Morgan wrote about, and I'm sure some others can chime in, but I love Diddy Kong Racing. It is still one of my favorite kart racers of all time.
There wasn't any other game like it because while there was that multiplayer component that you expect out of this type of game, it's a long, cohesive, single-player adventure that you played from the entirety of a kart. It's so cool.
But you also you can fly a plane, and you can do hovercraft. So flying a plane on a level that you've raced on in a kart kind of changes the flow of the race a little bit. And also the power up. So what you do is you'd have to upgrade. If you pick up a red balloon, that's a missile. You could fire it, or if you hold on to it and pick up a second red balloon, that upgrades it to a homing missile. But if you hold on to that and get a third, and level 3 was the highest, you could get a pack of 10 missiles. So it actually, a lot of times in Mario Kart, you'll get an item and you'll spam it right away to catch up or something. But Diddy Kong actually kind of encouraged you to be patient and kind of pick your spots. And that combined with the vehicles, combined with that adventure mode that Ozzy was talking about, which is super fun. This was a really, really unique game and one of my favorite games on the N64.
And I don't think we've seen anything like it since.
No, we haven't.
Really.
No, and Rare that was the golden age of Rare there. I mean, David will correct me if I'm wrong, but they got a 64, right, and had to learn how to code themselves. There were no classes on it, right? They did it all themselves. They learned in real time how to do that.
That was classic Nintendo. Nintendo would grant licenses, but they also saw you as competition, so they wouldn't teach you to use it. They'd give you an NES or an N64 or whatever, and they just say good luck. And your engineers would have to reverse engineer it. And in fact, they were Sculptured Software, their side business was they started selling documentation and development kits for the Super Nintendo because Nintendo just couldn't be bothered. And other studios were willing to pay just to save time from figuring out how to do it themselves. But we also inducted GoldenEye this year, which came out just a few months after Diddy Kong. This was, the Nintendo 64 got off to a slow start in 96, but 1997 was when it just came out swinging. Ozzy wrote about Mario Kart 64, one of the greatest kart racers of all time.
Yeah,
but going back to GoldenEye, I mean, that got multiplayer shooters on the map for consoles. Like,
yes,
this was like no big thing for PC players who have had games like Quake and who've had those types of games. But like something like GoldenEye was a console player's first entry into multiplayer shooters, and it's been such an undeniable influence on like games that would come since. And we wouldn't see anything touch it until Halo came along like 5 years later.
No.
Yeah, I know people like GoldenEye. People say, "Oh, it's not playable anymore." It's kind of like the Wolfenstein 3D to Halo's Doom almost, but it was still even. I came from a PC background. I started playing FPS games on PC, but getting multiplayer working was a chore. You had to go to DOS and like enter arcane command line commands to get Doom up and running. Having all your friends there playing split screen was easy and it was super fun as well.
Dude. Yeah, I the first time I ever had an adult beverage was over some Nintendo 64.
Over GoldenEye or something else?
Yeah, over GoldenEye.
Nice.
Yeah, it was definitely a party platform. Like you had the four ports. It was like definitely a console made with an emphasis on, multiplaying, and a lot of the games on this list that are for the 64 reflect that. Some of them though, however, like we have Duke Nukem 64 in here. We've also got Doom 64 in here, as well as, we'll get to Doom 2 in a second, but Doom 64 and Duke Nukem 64 are like solid first person ports. So it really shows, that era of first person gaming coming over to consoles, and like Nintendo really making a go of it, like seeing that that was popular.
Yeah, like Doom 64 was a brand new game, not just a new graphics engine. So there was reason to play it, even if like me, you'd played Doom 1 and 2 and Final Doom to death. But Duke 64, the really cool thing about it, Blake, which I wrote about, was it had bots. So if you didn't have 3 other people to play Duke match, you could play against bots, and they were pretty good too. So it was one of the earliest FPS games I can think of that actually made bots part of the built-in package, which was cool.
Yeah. But if we're gonna talk Doom, we better talk Doom 2. We gotta talk Doom 2, man. Oh my god, Doom 2.
It's the second Doom.
It is.
It is the second one of those, Blake. I think you will appreciate that. But no. It's much more than that. Like, I think Doom is better. Doom 1 is better in terms of pacing, level design, and atmosphere. But Doom 2 had these huge, expansive levels, some of which were like city environments. It also added just the right monsters to round out the rogues gallery in just the right way. A lot of the fights in Doom weren't really varied enough. You were just kind of shotgunning everything. And of course, it added the super shotgun, which was like, it had like almost the punch of a rocket launcher, but without the splash damage. And Doom 2 is a great game. And really it didn't need to do any more than it did. And it's still active today. Doom 2 is played by more people on Steam than a lot of current games.
It
honestly.
Solidified the series.
It did. Yeah. It did. It made it a series, right? Like it was Doom 2.
Yeah.
Now, David, because I wasn't allowed to play it. I wasn't allowed to play the game. Too violent. My parents didn't let me. Doom, Quake, anything like that. I was not allowed to play. If anything had blood in it, I was allowed to play Mortal Kombat because it was censored on the Super Nintendo. But that was it. I missed out on all these games. I'm so sad.
Right.
Now, David, out of everyone on the council, you were most excited about Doom 64. So what sets Doom 64 apart from the other games?
Yeah, so like Doom 2 is one. It is the 64th one of those for one. No, it was a brand new game. Doom at that time, I even joked in the entry, like even back in 1997, Doom was running and everything. Like it had been ported all over the place to varying results, right? But Doom 64 was actually id Software. I wrote about this. You can read about the making of Doom 64 in a long read on Shacknews, but Midway came to Williams Entertainment, Midway's home console division, came to id Software and said, we want to make a new Doom game. And they were like, well, let's see what you do with a port. So they brought Doom to PlayStation, which for my money is not only the best Doom port, but maybe the best version of Doom. I will die on that hill. And then id Software said, all right, make a brand new game. Do whatever you want with it. So they took the soundscape of Doom PSX. They built entirely new levels. They built a new graphics engine. They made Doom 64, and Doom 64 is fantastic. It is still a fast and frenetic game, but the levels are much bigger. There's more puzzle solving, so it has a very different pace and atmosphere than other Doom games. It's pretty terrifying. Like that music, it has the infamous like dead babies crying soundtrack. It has much more guttural noises from the monsters. Doom 64 is great, and it finally got its due when who was it? I think was it Night Dive? And Bethesda re-released it as the remastered edition in 2020 ahead of Doom Eternal. So you can play that game on modern platforms now, and if you haven't, you should. Doom 64 is in like the top 3 or 4 best Doom games, no doubt.
Hell yeah. Get it? Hell yeah. Oh.
Hell yeah.
The Fallout series, of course. I mean, it's interesting because like Fallout starts off as like not a first-person game. Right. It's more of just a tactical RPG where you get to make some insane decisions. Yeah. And it's twisted. It's really twisted. I think the original Fallout is more twisted than the modern versions of Fallout in a lot of ways. True. Yeah.
Because the original Fallout is where you find out how the super mutants are made. And it is not an attractive process.
No, the original Fallout is so good, and I think it has that level of maturity in its writing and in its story, because it came from Wasteland, which was an earlier Interplay game, really more or less the same thing, but Fallout was a brand new IP. And even to this day, there are fans who still swear by Fallout 2 and Brotherhood of Steel as the best games in that series. Just because of the writing, the character customization, and the perspective. What do you have to add to that, TJ?
I went back to Fallout 1 after having played all of New Vegas, all of its DLC, and it was like a research project for me to go and see where everything started. And it's hard to play that game in 2022. It's very you can see like the foundation of everything that would be refined in Fallout 3, whether it's the VAT system, whether it's the perks and skills and leveling up and all that jazz. But there are still things in the lore and design of Fallout 1 that I think are still like narratively and visually the best of the series. For my money, there is no villain in Fallout that is ever compared to the Master. That character is, first off, a just horrible to look at, but like the very nature of it as like this amalgam of consciousnesses. That are like fighting to have their say, and the conversation you're having with the Master is just so effective and unsettling all at the same time. As like a villain that truly believes that they're in the right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did all of you play this? Like, I know TJ mentioned you went back and played, but how did you play this in 1997?
If you had a PC, it was one of the best games of that year, and like the following year, Baldur's Gate. I mean, this was actually a golden age, because for a while people considered CRPGs, computer RPGs, dead. But in '96, early '97, you had Diablo, followed by Fallout, followed by Baldur's Gate. Like, if you had a PC at that time, you could not. There were like too many good RPGs to play.
Yeah, honestly. You were eating well.
Yeah,
eating well.
A lot of folks say that like Diablo didn't catch fire until Diablo 2. So for a lot of people, Fallout is the game that saved the CRPG.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly a lot more in depth than Diablo. Diablo is just click, and that's fine. That's what it is. But like, yes, to your point, TJ, like Fallout's much bigger on like character development and storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm. Like you everything you do in that game has an effect, and it's amazing to see how much of an effect it has that early in this kind of game, where you do something and like as you travel through the game, and it's actual like time system where days are passing as you travel. You see the effects of something you did way down the line, and it's like, wow, this is something back in 1997. They were pulling this stuff off.
Well,
Ozzy, do you have any? Oh, go ahead, Blake. What do you got?
I want to move on to Final Fantasy VII. I think we really gotta. I just want to. We don't have to. Everyone's pretty familiar with it. We got the remake recently, but this really brought. I feel like it really brought JRPGs to a whole new level of popularity in America.
For anybody who read my Super Mario RPG feature last year and wondered, wait, that was so successful. Why wasn't Nintendo and Square? Why weren't they popping champagne and like planning their next big collaboration? It's because Square Enix wanted to go bigger and they wanted to go more ambitious with their stories, but Nintendo wanted to stick to cartridges. And for the N64, they were going to run on cartridges. And that wasn't going to be enough for what Square wanted to do. So PlayStation came along and they're like, hey, we're running on discs. If you want to tell this really ambitious story, you can tell it on our discs. You'll need 6 of them, but you can still do it.
Yeah, and I mean that's also a big middle finger from Sony to Nintendo at the time, because the PlayStation wouldn't have even existed if Nintendo hadn't have backed out of their CD-ROM deal, like to build a new machine with Sony.
Did you know that the head of Sony did not want to get into video games, but he saw Nintendo, they were popular, and when Nintendo publicly humiliated Sony by announcing Philips as their partner, he called Ken Kutaragi, father of the PlayStation, and said, probably not paraphrasing, fucking kill them. Like, he was all in. He went in to kill Nintendo. Like, he was like, they're not getting away with that shit. I want to build a console just to bury them. Like, he was super pissed. And Blake, to your point, do you remember the ads for Final Fantasy VII, like the magazine ads? Like, there was one, they made a point, I wrote about the marketing for that game because it was revolutionary. Like, as revolutionary as FF7 was for RPGs, the marketing campaign was as revolutionary for video game advertising. And they made a point of only showing stills from cinematics because that was obviously the high point of Final Fantasy VII's graphics. But like one of the graphics was like showing this amazing still, and the copy was somebody get the guys who still make cartridges, cigarettes, and a blindfold. Like they were just... There was brutal. They had a bullseye in Nintendo. Like they were shooting to kill. And it was very indicative of how angry Sony was at Nintendo because, public humiliation in Japan, not cool. And then Sony was really just gunning for Nintendo back then. And they arguably went a long way toward getting back at them.
This game helped me get to my reading level. When I was 12, I was struggling reading in school to my reading level, and this game is what helped me because I was interested. You get them to focus, and it helped. There's so much blurs of text here, and I was able to later out found I had dyslexia, which was a problem, but it helped me get up to where I should have been. So it has a soft spot in my heart for sure, just for that reason.
Yeah, I had a younger cousin who just hated reading, but he loved playing RPGs. And his mom was like, I want him to read more books. And I'm like, if he wants to, fine. But like, he's doing a lot of reading. His vocabulary was advanced because of these RPGs he was playing. And it started on PlayStation 1 with him, and it started with FF7, I believe. Yep. So.
And this was such a turning point for that franchise because like people will swear by Final Fantasies 3, like 4, 6, but 7 is where they really started going as big as they could possibly go. And they didn't look back. Because like from there, they just kept coming up with bigger stories, like the bigger stories in 8 and in 9. And then it just kept going from there. Like it went from like a pretty good RPG series to like the standard. And it started with this.
Yeah, and I want to move on here in a second, but I do want to say one thing. Final Fantasy VII for like me was that thing where like I was into it before it was as cool. Like it was like everybody, I was pretty broke. I didn't have a PlayStation as a kid, right?
Sure.
I just couldn't afford it. So all my friends were playing Final Fantasy VII and telling me about how great Final Fantasy VII was. And I'm like, I mean, where were you when I was playing 2 and 3 and telling you about it? Like yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, really? Final Fantasy? You're going to tell me how fucking cool it is? And rub it in my face that you have a PlayStation? Fuck you.
You're telling me how cool a bad guy Sephiroth is? Where were you when I was telling you about Kefka?
Yeah. Kefka is a creepy-ass clown, man. Fuck. Yeah, so Final Fantasy VII definitely deserves it. I don't know. There's so many good games. You can all and please go read all of our Hall of Fame entries.
Yeah.
Um, Grand Theft Auto. We gotta talk about Grand Theft Auto. Look at if you look at where this game started and where it is now, it's pretty fucking insane.
Like, look at how different this looks from what we have now.
Yeah, yeah. It was an overhead world, played with you didn't even have analog for this. This was just I remember the first time I played Grand Theft Auto was at school. Someone had downloaded it and put it on the computer. I've been telling a lot of stories. For the record, I went to a continuation school, which means we weren't the best kids. Doesn't necessarily mean we weren't bright, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is what it is.
It sounds like you were all savvy in a way, though. Like you could do stuff the adults probably didn't know how to do.
Dude, yeah, no, me and my buddy Dave were both kind of into computers and stuff. He's like a programmer at like Craigslist now and stuff like that. But yeah, he had put Grand Theft Auto demo on one of the computers in our English class. And we were just sitting back there laughing our asses off, doing crazy stuff, going on killing sprees, and then driving a car off of a ramp into the river and dying and stuff like that. It already embodied and encompassed a lot of the over the top insane action that you would come to be associated with the Grand Theft Auto series after Grand Theft Auto 3. But yeah, I remember kind of when I found out Grand Theft Auto 3 was like third person and stuff, I was kind of like, what the fuck? Like why would they do that? And I thought it was gonna ruin it, but then I saw my friends playing it and started playing it myself, and I'm like, oh my god, this is revolutionary. So if this series doesn't exist, I think open world gameplay sandbox environments don't end up being in the place they are in gaming today.
Yeah.
I mean, even here, they're playing with a sandbox environment really early on. And I mean, they're not the first. I mean, you could say Zelda, if Zelda didn't exist, you wouldn't get Grand Theft Auto in a lot of ways too. But yeah, I don't know. You just can't underline how important the Grand Theft Auto series has become to games. And when you look at where they started and where they are now, it's just amazing. Ice hockey.
Everyone had that moment. You can go anywhere. Like what? I can get into any kind of vehicle. Like what?
And that was GTA 1. Like I had a similar experience. TJ mentioned demo discs earlier. Just like you, Blake, I played GTA 1 on PC for the first time from a demo disc. I didn't know any of the characters. I didn't care. I didn't know the story. I didn't care. We were just, my friends and I just got around. We took turns and we'd play, see how high of a wanted level we can get, and just play until we got killed or busted. Like that was the game, as far as I was concerned. That was the game.
It's still kind of the game. I mean,
it's still the game. Yeah,
that's what groups of friends have been doing with Grand Theft Auto since its inception, and it's fantastic that it's a time-honored tradition in a lot of ways. We got a lot to talk about. Ice hockey, Jazz Jackrabbit.
I would like to. Yeah, Jazz Jackrabbit. Before that, Ozzy, I mean, you wrote a lot of these entries as well. Blake and I could wax on for about some of our favorite games. What are your favorite games in our inductions this year?
Well, we're gonna get to it shortly, but Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, I still go back and I play through that like every other year, just because it's such a wonderful platformer. And what they did visually with that game, while they kept Yoshi looking like almost like close to the same as Super Mario World, but the rest of what they did with the art style was just blew me away. Like what they did with the Super FX chip is just incredible. So it's still a game that holds up. It's actually why I got frustrated in reviewing like some of the later entries in the series. Like I think I reviewed Yoshi's Island. I actually liked Yoshi's Island DS. It was the one on the 3DS. It was New Yoshi's Island, where I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, it just feels like so half-baked and like we're just running through the motions, and like people forget what an innovation that 1995 game felt like, and what an accomplishment it felt when you got to the end. So that original still holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games towards the end of Super Nintendo's life cycle were just phenomenally good looking and really showed what the console can do. And I remember being bummed that we were getting a new generation in a lot of ways, because I felt like people are just really starting pushing the envelope with the Super Nintendo. I mean, that's, my childhood understanding of it at the very least. But yeah.
Something I also got the idea to induct this year was after playing the remake of Live Alive this year and reviewing it, and then I started looking into the original, I go, they had some really good ideas. This is a game that came out on the Super Famicom back in 93, I think it was. And it never made it to Europe. It never made it to North America. It was a Japanese exclusive game. And the idea of taking these 7 different RPG storylines and then converging them all first, and then making them all different, first of all. Like, they all play differently. They all lean into different genres, including one that was just almost like a prototype Resident Evil type of thing. I thought, I'm like, that's neat. And then bringing it all together where either all 7 characters can come together to take on the evil villain, or you can be the evil villain and take out the seven heroes yourself. It's such a cool idea. And it made after playing the remake, I was just like, wow, we missed out on that original. So I wanted to give that original game a shout out.
And
also, Megalomania is such a slapper of a track. Is that what the kids say? But it's such a banging track. I absolutely love that song. It inspired Toby Fox for Undertale. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't heard Megalomania from Live Alive, go look for it on YouTube. It's awesome.
Yeah, and also I think it's worth noting most of the Hall of Fame inductions are based off of U.S. publication dates, and we don't really put too many things from Japan or that were Japan exclusive into the Hall of Fame. So I think it's also worth noting that this is, a rare exception as well in that scenario, but well worth it. And I think that it's a smart entry. All right. Oh my God. So many different games. I think MechWarrior 2, at the time, this was mind blowing. You're in a giant robot doing some very tactical combat with squads. You have to be very meticulous about your mech loadout and how you're tweaking and balancing everything. Otherwise, you were going to get screwed. Really tough game. I feel like it was really tough, but it was also very thrilling. And it really showed a transition, I think, for first-person shooters.
That intro cinematic is one of my favorites of all time. Just chilling, sets a great atmosphere. And Blake, I don't know, something Greg mentioned earlier, he talked about playing Parappa the Rapper, and rhythm games were still new enough that he was like, what even is this game? What am I doing? I kind of felt like that with MechWarrior 2, but it was kind of like a fun thing. I was figuring out everything. That was, I went to California for my uncle's wedding. He handed me copies of MechWarrior 2 and Full Throttle. I came home, caught on to Full Throttle right away because of the really easy skull verb icon interface. But MechWarrior, I was like, what do I do in this game? But that intro was so good that it made me want to learn how to pilot these mechs. And every little step of every inch of progress I fought for in that game felt like a huge accomplishment. And I love MechWarrior 2, and I'm really glad we inducted it this year.
I agree. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Woo, boy, what to say here? I wrote about.
Well, it depends on which version we're talking about, Blake, because there were two different ones.
Well, the concept is similar for both the arcade version and the home console version. Basically, Michael Jackson approached Sega to make these games. Michael Jackson. We all know who Michael Jackson is. I think even younger people understand the cultural reference there. So we don't have to get into too deep about what Michael Jackson stands for, because that's also kind of reflected in the game. So in both versions, the arcade version is like an isometric view for up to 3 players. So you have 3 Michaels all dressed in their smooth criminal outfits. The Sega Genesis version is a side-scrolling game where you just play the one Michael. Both of them involve you fighting using Michael Jackson dance moves, and you have the special ability to start a choreographed dance scene with all the enemies on stage, and at the end of it, they all blow up. But your quest was basically to go around and find these orphans and touch them, and that would save them, and they would say thank you and run away from Michael Jackson. And then at the end of the Genesis levels, Bubbles the chimp was a pet chimp that Michael owned and dressed like a My Buddy and Me, basically. would hop up on his shoulders and take him to like where the boss fight was in the last level. If you found Bubbles the Chip in the arcade version, though, you would turn into a giant robot Michael Jackson and shoot lasers at everybody. Yeah, wow. Wow, just wow, what games. I actually recently played the Genesis version as research, and I own a copy of it, and honestly not a bad game. And like, if you take away the creepiness of Michael Jackson and his legacy, I think that this game goes in a higher level of pedigree and pantheon, because it's a fantastic crossover between a musician and a game company. It's much better than Revolution X.
Yeah, like Michael Jackson, this was like, it was kind of like the Jordan versus Bird of its time. Like Jordan and Bird were both hugely popular when that game came out. And then Michael Jackson was arguably at the peak of his popularity for that era when Moonwalker came out. So it was like, it wasn't just like some no-name celebrity slapping their name on the cabinet, right? Like this was a big deal. A lot of the curiosity was, oh, Michael Jackson's in this game? What?
Yeah, he was the king of pop. Yeah, and I mean, this wouldn't be his... Like, he was into video games and stuff like that because he had, like, a childlike mental state because, I mean, the dude grew up in the spotlight and was heavily abused and didn't really have a childhood. I don't think that really justifies any of the other stuff he's been accused of over the years, but, I mean, it gives you a context for why someone like Michael Jackson would approach Sega. He also worked on some of the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 music as well, which is kind of an interesting note. But yeah, it's also got a lot of chiptunes versions of his songs in these games as well. Just a real...
We've talked a lot about the Genesis version, but Greg, as the man behind our old Arcade Corner bits, what do you remember about the arcade version?
Exactly what Blake said. Like, I remember it being much cooler than the home console versions. And at the time, I never understood why the home console versions played like trash and did not look on par with the arcade versions. My brain didn't understand how coding worked or power worked or circuitry worked. So I would get a game like Moonwalker, bring it home, be like, this isn't like the arcade. Why isn't it like the arcade? And it'd be so let down. It would overlap me walking it. But like the arcade version was like, it was much more fun. It was much more fun, like much more arcadey, visually more impressive. The giant robot it's this weird thing, as like Blake said, out of nowhere would just come out and just be like, what? But it was so fun, you didn't care, you didn't question it. It was so much fun to play.
It was all based, a lot of it was based off of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker movie as well. So a lot of the inspiration, like the Smooth Criminal video premiered in that film, and that's why he's got the Smooth Criminal outfit on. And that song, I mean, just perpetuated. I think, it's not his most famous tune, but at the time, like, it slapped. I just like to think of them as Quincy Jones songs now. That's how I look at it. Man, Mortal Kombat 2. Of course, Mortal Kombat 2 is going to be in here. Read David's book for more on that. Let's just give a quick shout out to some, unless anybody has anything to say about some of these. I'm just going to go through.
Well, you went past, you scrolled past Mega Man 3, and one thing I want to say about Mega Man 3 is one thing with franchises that have had multiple Hall of Fame worthy games is we don't want to blow our load on those. So we leave a few in the cooler for future Hall of Fame classes. This year was for Mega Man 3. And one thing that our induction actually doesn't touch on is this was the debut of Rush. And in this age of video game pets, like Rush kind of was a pioneer in that sense.
Yeah, Rush was really cool just because he was, like, when you get down to it, he was just a new form, a new modality for the items in Mega Man 2. But, those are just item 1, item 2, item 3. Rush was a character, he had a personality. And I wrote this, I focused on the fact that, like, Mega Man 3 is a good game, but I feel like it often gets overlooked in favor of 2. And I am very much in the camp of Mega Man 3 is better than 2, and I'll die on that hill. So I was really glad to just talk about it this year. I love Mega Man 3.
I also enjoyed 3 more than 2.
I think 3 might be my absolute favorite in the series when it comes to the music. There are so many tracks from this particular game that are so freaking good and have been remixed over and over and over again throughout the ages. Sparkman, probably my favorite theme in all of Mega Man. Snake Man, Shadow Man, Top Man, and Needle Man, also freaking good.
Yeah.
This was just banger after banger after banger in every one of the levels. I love this game's music.
Agreed. Yeah, Mega Man 3. It's super special too because I do mention at the midpoint. By that point, Capcom thought, well, you probably know it's coming. You're going to Wily's Castle, but not yet. The Mega Man 2 Robot Masters came back on remixed stages from Mega Man 3 that were NES hard, to put it nicely. But it was really cool you technically fought 16 Robot Masters in this game, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you fought them again. You didn't have a whole lot of levels to get through, but I mean, most Mega Man games involve like going back and having to fight all the bosses again.
In Wily's Castle, but in this you fought all the bosses from 2 and the new bosses in 3.
And then you had to fight all the bosses from 3.
3 again. Yeah, in Wily's Castle, the Gauntlet. Yeah.
There you go. Let's see. David wrote a whole book about Mortal Kombat that you can buy, and you can read our entry as well. Mutant League Football, man. What a
great game.
You're talking about Madden, but like this was like taking Madden and then adding in exploding footballs, the ability to bribe the refs, hazards on the field, and a bunch of creepy looking aliens and orcs all playing football. It hit a note with me. I wasn't the biggest football fan like as a kid at this time, but like you throw mutants into it and some violence, and you got me hooked. And
it was a game for people who didn't like football games to play football games.
Yeah, that was it. This was a really fun time for sports games before everything was simulation heavy and licensed. On a similar note, like California games we inducted this year. I wrote that, and that was cool because it had really precise controls, but just a great spectrum of events: surfing, half pipe, juggling a hacky sack. Like
the hacky sack was the best, and the bike races.
It was best. You could do like a behind the ankle kick. Like it was really cool. And California Games was a huge franchise for its time. It was on everything. Like it was on so many platforms, and I really miss that franchise just because like I don't really get into NBA 2K or Madden. I like kind of more free spirited things like Mutant League Football, like California Games, and so it's kind of cool that we paid tribute to both those games this year.
Precise controls, sir. I'll point you to the skating mini game. My ass.
Oof. Yeah. So not all of them stuck to landing, but most of them were pretty good. Most of them were pretty good.
The BMX was solid. Yeah, the BMX was really solid. But that skating one, oh my God. I'm like, why am I not jumping? I press A, you should jump. No, you got to hold it and let go. I'm like, what madness is this?
Yes.
I loved the sheer occasional lack of presentation in California games, where like in the skating game you would just trip and fall on your face and it would just sit for 5 seconds and then you go back to the game screen.
I think
load or something. Yeah, it just stayed on screen forever. I was like, what is that? I don't know what's going on, but I lost.
I think the argument I made last year for inducting the Atari Lynx to David was it had the best version of California Games.
That's true, Blake. That's true.
Yeah.
You're right. I remember that game could be kind of brutal. Like when you wiped down on the half pipe, you'd leave like a smear of blood. And as a kid, I didn't say holy shit, but today I would say holy fucking shit.
You could get eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
Like your board would just be there.
Win all the games, right? There are only certain ones you could actually finish, but otherwise, like an environmental hazard would just wipe you out, or a shark would eat you. Like they would go on forever until something would interrupt.
Like Tetris, like you're eventually going to get overwhelmed. But that was part of the fun, right? Like you play with your friends, all gather around the keyboard or controller, whatever you played it on, and just try to beat each other's scores. It was great. Love that game.
Hell yeah. Well, let's see. We got time to maybe go over like a couple more games. If there's anything we want to do. Dig Dug, I feel like we overlooked last year. Of course, Dig Dug's going to be in the Hall of Fame. We don't need to talk about it too much. Everybody loves Dig Dug. Still a very unique concept in a game, I think.
I think Asif would come and chase us for the holidays if we didn't talk about Star Fox 64.
I was going to ask you to talk about it on his behalf.
What an incredible game, where it's something that it's funny because like after however many sequels have come out, this is still the game that Nintendo is chasing after. This is still the one that they want to do. They don't want to move on from it. And for a good reason, because the level design is wonderful. The on-rail shooting is so responsive. There are branching paths that to get the perfect playthrough is so you have to be on top of your game. You have to have almost a perfect run in order to get the best path and get the best ending. The way that your 2-hour playthrough will vary depending on what little thing you miss or however many ships you shoot down or however fast you can beat Star Wolf. Like it's such a cool thing to see, and I don't blame Nintendo for continuing to chase this because it's such a wonderful game, and that's why it's in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, it's what it is for a reason, and it's infinitely quotable because we're still talking about doing a barrel roll to this day.
There was the submarine level, I believe, could be missed, right, Ozzy? Like when I remember the schoolyard trial, I got in a submarine. You're like, what? There's no submarine in Star Fox. What?
Yeah, it's easy to miss it because you
God,
didn't
those days are gone. I miss
because you didn't do
days.
everything in the previous mission. But yeah, that submarine mission, that is one thing. That is one knock against it because that submarine mission, your frame rate will go down to like 4.
Yeah, it was a
slideshow. Because of the soundtrack and because of how great the soundtrack is, it felt epic, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Star Fox 64 multiplayer was to me what GoldenEye 64 was to a lot of people. I loved playing Star Fox multiplayer with my friends and like outshooting them, outflying them. Like you had an arena in which you could like straight up put your piloting skills to the test against your buddies. And I loved that. I loved being able to shoot down my pals and show I was the ace. I was the Star Fox.
Yeah, I
can only be one Star Fox.
I love the on-rail sections, and I'm a huge fan of the on-rail sections of Star Fox, but those all-range mode arenas were just crazy fun.
We also did the Rumble Pack earlier, but that worked with this game, and it was
the best game to pack it
now,
with.
But at the time, you're like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever made.
And going back to our Blockbuster entry, Blockbuster would give you the Rumble Pack because it's like, well, it kind of comes with it, and they insist on packing it along with it. So here you go. You rent the game, you get the Rumble Pack too. And you feel why Rumble has lasted as long as it has.
Absolutely.
Right.
X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, a phenomenal game. Super Bomberman series, just classic. We talked a little bit about Super Off-Road already and Iron Man, Ivan Stewart, so we don't need to really get into that too much. Curse of Monkey Island.
Blake, this is the third one of those. This is the third Monkey Island game. Yeah, it was, adventure games were, the genre was becoming oversaturated by this point, but the Curse of Monkey Island still stood out. It kind of fell short in some ways, but if you liked these games, if you liked the wit that they were known for, this was still a really fun adventure game to enjoy.
This is also where it goes away from the pixel art.
Yeah, like just I feel like that was kind of when you look back, pixel art was part of the charm of adventure games. It was definitely a double-edged sword. Some of the puzzles really boiled down to hunting for the right pixel in the mass of other pixels, right? And very few games I felt that started with pixel art, such as Gabriel Knight, went on to success afterwards. Like I think Gabriel Knight 2, which was an FMV game, is great, but Gabriel Knight 3, much like Curse of Monkey Island, used 3D and to varying results. Not nearly as impressive as Curse of Monkey Island.
I'm gonna compare it to Dylan going electric, right? People it's taking something you love and that's familiar and changing something about it. Like if you're used to a certain visual style and that's what you're expecting, and then you get something completely different, it's going to take away some of that familiarity for you. And I think that was a tough transition for a lot of these titles you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. Tomb Raider 2 was the second Tomb Raider, but man, was it better than the first. So much better than the first. I think this is the one that really put Tomb Raider on the map as a franchise, and
Oh, you made
brought it.
me paranoid. I thought I moved the B to the R in Raider for a second there. But yeah.
David is
I
our
remember
resident
having
Tomb
to
Raider
tap the
historian
D-pad
here.
and having to move step by step in that game, and I'd be like, "What is like?" It was it was tank controls, but it was like very gratifying if you mastered them because they were so challenging to master.
Yeah.
I don't know
Was this
about-
the one where you could be a super jerk to the butler at Laura's
Lock him in the
Mansion
fridge.
and
Yeah.
just shoot at him, and he uses his little serving tray as a shield while you're.
We locked him in the fridge in the game. He'd follow you to the fridge and you lock him in.
You could just be terrible to that poor old man.
Poor butler. I hope they should have made him a villain in like later games, and they're just like. He's like, why would I do this? And then it just flashes back to like all the polygon graphics.
I was stuck in that fridge for 80 years. I don't have my revenge.
I was frozen. My wife died.
I'll take everything from you.
Oh man, Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Fuck yeah, Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Like, oh, I gotta say, my favorite thing about Turok though was all the cheats. Like big head mode and like the paintball mode, stuff like that. I just loved digging around with Turok. But also
GoldenEye had those cheats as well. What I loved about Turok, like maybe you'll agree, I loved the weapons. Like I think Turok 2 is where they really shine, but Turok 1 had some great weapons as well.
Did it have the cerebral bore in the first one?
That was 2.
Oh, okay, that's what I remember.
I don't remember you being in any video games, Greg. Oh,
the cerebral bore?
Oh,
wow,
man.
wow,
Oh
wow,
my
wow,
God.
wow.
I
Ice
don't
cold.
mean it.
No, that was 2.
Because you couldn't find it didn't have a
the
map,
fog.
so like you just would get lost, and you're like, where do I go?
Yeah. That was around the time first-person shooters were starting to do away with maps. I can remember Quake 1 didn't have a map, and I'm like, did we decide we don't need this anymore? Where am I right now? I'm sorry,
Half-Life
TJ. What were you?
have a map? Because that's when I got lost in too. I think David's right. Yeah, they just didn't. What's a map? Just go, kill things.
What were you saying, TJ?
Oh, I am Turok. Every time you start.
Turok. Turok is how he said it for some reason.
So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but like Turok's actually based off a comic by Valiant Comics.
Yeah.
About a Native American dinosaur hunter. And yeah, it's not a well-known comic book. It was getting kind of Valiant was trying to come back in the like mid 90s and put themselves on the map again. So I'm sure that had something to do with this game coming out. But yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. Like people did not know who the hell Turok was before the game came out.
I'll tell you exactly why it came out. So in the process of writing Long Live Mortal Kombat, I talked to 2 of the 3 co-founders of Acclaim. They bought Valiant Comics because they wanted to make a Turok game. So they bought Valiant Comics. Yep. That's where it came from. That's why they were behind the marketing, because they owned Turok.
I remember you had in the original user manual for Turok on 64, they actually had like in the back maybe 10 to 15 pages, there was a Turok comic in the user manual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rob Holmes, one of the co-founders, and just a marketing whiz. Like he was kind of the one who was like, why don't we build a campaign around releasing Mortal Kombat? We could call it Mortal Monday. That was kind of his idea. But he bought Valiant because he wanted Acclaim to become like a multimedia company, not just video games. But that's why they included the comic. He wanted a lot of cross-pollination. He wanted to position the Turok character as a video game mascot, and then also get you into buying Valiant Comics, which Acclaim now owned, by including that comic in the instruction manual. So they were trying to cross over as much as they could there. Yeah,
it's just kind of an odd duck for it's a honestly, I think it's an easier video game sale than a comic book sale in some ways. And Turok's come back both in comic book and video game form since then. Supposedly, the run that they did on Turok like a year or so ago was pretty decent. I haven't checked it out personally. Man, that's crazy. I didn't know they just straight up outright bought Valiant. Wow.
Yep.
That's also not because Valiant used to publish the Mario Brothers comics as well.
Yeah, they built a motion capture studio where some of the motion capture for the Batman Forever movie and game was done as well.
Digitized sprites, be damned.
Small world. I'll talk quickly about Twisted Metal 2. It's the second Twisted Metal. It just, I mean, it expanded upon. It took the lore of the first one and really like tore into it. You had like a bunch of comic book segments where Calypso, the main enemy, was narrating everything and just painted this dark and twisted world. You know, I mean, it literally was twisted. And like one of the breakout characters from this game is you literally just get a dude that's been welded to two giant like monster truck wheels as one of your options, one of your playable characters in this game. You were traveling around the world, so there were some levels where you got to blow up landmarks. You get to destroy the Eiffel Tower in one game. You can shoot the Statue of Liberty until it turns into a chick in a bikini. Just weird little things like that. And the first Twisted Metal game was fun, but Twisted Metal 2 was fun and like had the humor and the aesthetic. And I think that and even, I think it was the best Twisted Metal until we got to Twisted Metal Black. Personally, I honestly feel that way. And a lot of what Twisted Metal Black did harken back to the heydays of 2. So yeah, I just want to get that in there. Ultima Online, if anyone wants to say anything, or Forever Hold Your Peace.
Just one of the no, you don't. It was just one of the foundational MMOs, right? Like it was hugely influential.
The first time
for its
permadeath
time.
Was a big issue. Remember that? It was a big deal. So he died
because of PKing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 just took a lot
MK3, but with we remembered Scorpion this time.
And if you want to know why they left him out, read my book.
So, nice plug, David. Available now. Then hold it up.
Any of our wrestling fanatics want to say anything about WCW versus NWO World Tour?
Just a total change in atmosphere from what wrestling games had been before that, where they were more arcade based, they were button mashers. This was more like a momentum based grapple system, and it's one that's still the standard to this day. And it all started with World Tour.
Nice. Windows Minesweeper and Windows Solitaire both made the list. I was kind of pushing for these a little bit. Look, even if you don't play games, odds are if you've had a PC like in the 90s and onward until they kind of shat the bed with how they bundled this stuff, chances are you spent quite a long time. Maybe you got a job, there wasn't a lot to do. You might have been playing a lot of Minesweeper and Solitaire.
People were playing Minesweeper during meetings.
Yeah, man.
It's the only game on your dad's friend's PC, but damn it, you were gonna play it.
Yeah.
And you were gonna beat it on hard.
I'm surprised Ski Free didn't make it into the list.
That one wasn't packaged with Windows. I think you needed like an add-on pack or something.
Okay. It was only on certain computers that got Ski Free. Like I didn't have Ski Free, but there you go. We already talked about a lot of these here, but let's see if there's. I'm sorry, I'm getting the hiccups now. If there's anything else anybody wants to just give a quick shout out to before we wrap things up? Super Bomberman. The Bomberman series is always good. Super Bomberman might be the pinnacle in a lot of ways, though. I feel just the best version.
And it's something that Konami still hasn't really replicated its success.
Yes, people really didn't seem to like Super Bomberman R, the latest one.
Okay, I played it. It's the same as the old ones, but it's missing some sort of it's missing some charm to it, I think.
All right, and then we got Star Wars X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. I mean, come on, everyone wanted to pilot an X-Wing back in the day, and this kind of took the Wing Commander formula and put it in the Star Wars universe, and these games are still super popular to this day. And it's Star Wars. Come on. It's not the third Star Wars. Sonic and Knuckles made 2 categories this year, both as an extraordinary thing and as a video game. This was like the first DLC.
Yes.
Before there was DLC, and the internet, if you liked a game, you had to buy it, and that's all you ever got. Sonic and Knuckles was a standalone, but then if you put Sonic 3 or Sonic 2 on there, not only you could play Knuckles, and like the game was augmented in a few other ways as well. And then if you put any other Sega games in there, it would just give you a mini game of like I think Sonic Pinball. Not Sonic Pinball, but a pinball mini game with Sonic.
You know how mind blowing it was when you first put in Sonic and Knuckles, and you're like, you have like basically 2 full games here, but depending on which game character you pick, it was like it was actually like mind blowing to my child mind that like the Sonic campaign and the Knuckles campaign were like similar, but also completely different from one another, and the way that events played out as you play through the levels.
Yeah, but also, yeah, that's another. Yeah, the different stories is another interesting point, TJ. I definitely agree with that. Yeah, and I just loved it. For Sonic, I loved exploring all the levels and seeing it all because there were paths I always felt like I was pushed towards in the Sonic games, like that I would just naturally go from point A to point B through. But getting Tails or getting Knuckles allowed me to kind of explore in a different way than I would with Sonic, and I really enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed that in the Sonic series, honestly, as I like looking at all the different ways you can go about the map and like finding all the secrets. So yeah, that was a big thing for me, and
that they were able to do that without breaking the game was just amazing.
Yeah. And then I think last but not least, we have a ton of more things you can read about in here, but let's end it with Quake 2. I think that's appropriate.
Well, actually, if we're going to end it with Quake 2, I do want to make one more note. So just to go behind the scenes a little bit, the council meets for weeks in determining what goes in. So when we decided to induct Armored Core, we had no idea that there was going to be an Armored Core 6 announcement.
Yeah,
that is true. That is absolutely.
David, did you want to say something about Armored Core?
I wrote about it.
Blake speaks to it. From Software was they weren't really on my radar until Demon Souls, like a lot of people. So Blake, take it away.
Man, here's the thing. Everyone's always like, "Oh, this game's the Dark Souls of this. This game's the Dark Souls of that." Oh, Dark Souls is actually the Armored Core of fantasy games, technically speaking.
This is like your Final Fantasy VII argument again, isn't it? Like, where were you guys when?
I like From Software when they were making giant robot games because I like giant robots more than I like dragons. That's me personally. No, these games were great. The thing about these mechs that I think that no other games have really nailed is it feels like a big, heavy fucking mech. Right? These things don't move like Zone of Enders things. They're not like Gundam, like blasting around. Like, you really had to think about... Clunky. Yeah, if you designed your mech to be overweight and heavy, you were going to have a hard time getting around levels. If you didn't make the load... It's almost similar to MechWarrior 2. If you didn't make your loadout right, you were going to have a bad time. And it was very much like a mech simulator more than most games out at the time. Fantastic concept. I loved customizing my mechs and going out on missions. It was very cool, and it was still challenging. I mean, the challenge was still there. Like, these weren't easy games. Like, From Software was still kicking your butt back in the day. Only I liked it a little bit more because I like playing with giant robots. We did.
Now it's time to end on Quake.
Yeah, we had no idea. David, you were there when I flipped my shit.
I was
at the Game Awards when they announced the new Armored Core.
Did you know that Patches actually makes his first appearance in a From Software game in Armored Core 2?
Oh, nice. That's amazing. I want to look that up on YouTube now. Quake 2, a fitting culmination of our stream this year. And there's so much, like Blake said, there's so much more for you to read on the Hall of Fame Class of 22 page. But Quake 2 is significant because it was actually... It was the second Quake. It's right there in the title. You can't miss it. It was not the third nor the first. It was, in fact, the second. And honestly, this is kind of a black sheep, but it's really because, and I get into this in Rocket Jump, which you can read on Shack News, but that's right. That's right, Greg. It's a Rocket Jump, the first of its kind. This was, id Software was like, we don't really care about story in our games. We have to call this something. They went through a bunch of names and they decided to just slap Quake 2 on it and call it a day. Even though it has nothing in common with the first, it's not a continuation at all. But that actually, I think, worked in its favor. just a year later, we would get games like Unreal and Half-Life, which were watershed moments in FPS because the Doom clone was not dead, but it was starting to recede. Unreal and Half-Life told stories through contiguous environments that felt like worlds, especially Half-Life with the Black Mesa facility. But Quake 2 did that first with Planet Strogg. It was still very much an id Software game. The ultimate objective is still to shoot all the things, but you were going through contiguous levels. You were doing things that amounted to more than just pushing buttons or throwing levers. Sometimes you were pushing satellites into slots, so that that's not a button, that's an innovation. And the weapons felt great in this game. The super shotgun in Quake 2, for my money, is the best super shotgun in all the first-person shooters. Oh. The chain gun might be the best chain gun in first-person shooters. Quake 2 is a great game. Go check it out.
TJ, I want super shotgun, the best ever, Quake 2. TJ is our shotgun expert.
Okay.
I do love the shotguns in Quake 2, like specifically Quake 2. I'm not a fan of the shotguns in the first Quake at all.
No, same.
But like, they took the notes and they moved on and they made it better in Quake 2. Everything about Quake 2 feels better than Quake 1 to me in every way. Like, I don't know if that's a controversial opinion at all, but it really is like some of my best memories of my first 3D first person shooters are associated with Quake 2, to the point where I still have that soundtrack on a burned disc in my car from like 2004, like the last time I made a mixtape.
It's so good. I cannot tell you how many times I just watched the attract mode, because that first song that plays it just hits so hard. But yeah, Quake 2 is kind of like Zelda 2 in that it's very much a black sheep, but people are slowly coming around to it. And I think it was just because it was so different. Quake 1, I love Quake 1, but it was really just kind of, I did an interview with someone recently for another project where she said, actually it was Rebecca Heineman whom we inducted. She said they should have just called Quake Doom 3D, because that's kind of what it was. It was really not any different. Quake 2 was its different thing. It had a cohesive world, cohesive enemies, cohesive weapons. It's really underrated, and I don't think Raven's sequel, Quake 4, was as good. But Quake 2 is really, really special. Also really cool, like the enemy death animations, sometimes they just fall over. Sometimes they would sit up and take a few last shots at you. So it actually behooved you, if you kept shooting them, you'd jib them. And that was actually a strategy. You wanted to jib them because you didn't want to turn your back and then get shot by a dying enemy. Yeah, Quake 2 is just really, really cool. It's a great game, and it's my favorite of the trilogy.
And a great way for us to wrap up this Shacknews Hall of Fame stream. If you want to check out everything else in our Hall of Fame stream, good news, it's up. You can check it out now. You can let us know what you think. Comment on it. Tweet at us. However you feel like chatting about it. Let us know. I'm dropping a link there in your Twitch chat for you. And that's a wrap on 2022, basically. Wow, what a crazy year it's been here and for the rest of the world. I am so very proud of you all for making it through, and you're doing great. I want everybody watching at home, everyone on Shacknews staff, to know that I'm proud of you and you're doing great. Thank you, everybody watching at home, for a fantastic year. Thank you to the Shacknews staff for the incredible hard work that they've put in, not just this week, but wow, could they get some fucking medals for what they've been doing these last few weeks. Yeah, it was not an easy year to get through, and y'all did it with style and grace, and I really applaud everything that we've been able to do at Shacknews here. I couldn't ask for a better crew to work with, and I wouldn't, and hopefully I will never have to. Enjoy the rest of the year. Let's all get the hell out of here. Let's go run through the
Go play Quake 2.
Screaming. Go play Quake 2. Go play all these. Go read our Hall of Fame and pick up the games.
Yes.
Read about it. Learn it. Go get David's book and deep dive into Mortal Kombat.
Book, yeah.
Long live Mortal Kombat. Available now at B. Dalton. Crown Books.
Wow.
Come on,
wouldn't
folks.
that be nice? Yeah.
He works hard.
Yeah.
And Walden Books and Borders and
Oh.
Oh, too bad.
I just made book readers sad.
Yeah.
No, yeah, check shacknews.com. Check it out. That's where we are. If you like what you saw here, give us a follow and sub so that you don't miss out on any of the fantastic content we're going to be making in 2023 for you. And of course, keep up with us on social media while we're on vacation. We're going to be dropping all of our Game of the Year stuff, so you're definitely going to want to check that out. Who won what? It's going to be a mystery until we post it. So yeah, if you like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter or check out our hot thirst traps on Shack News Media, you can keep up with all that. Greg is going to be posting all the videos up where, Greg?
Shacknews Games. Shacknews Games is going to be popping the next 2 weeks.
That's right. And you can also check out all of our interviews from the year over on Gamer Hub videos. With that, I think we've done all the shameless plugs except for one for Shack Pets, which will go now. And let's just say once and for all, I'm dedicating this year to Lola and her memory. She'll be with us always. We love you, Lola, and we will always miss you.